Okay, welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harris. Thank you for joining us again. And today we are joined by both our college hoops senior analysts, Caleb Slayton and Drew Barton. Drew's cranky. Caleb has yet to say a word, and he's got a full beard going on. Damn, that was quick. So how you doing, Caleb? I know Drew's.
It's been a month.
Has it
It's
been
been
that
a month
long?
of beard growth, yeah.
All right. So how you been? You missed a couple shows.
Been good. I think I missed one.
Oh, okay. I'm all out of whack.
All good.
All right, so we'll jump right into our college hoops notebook, and I guess I want to, we had all these great matchups, and some weren't even ranked matchups, but they were really good games. Dare I say, St. Mary's Gonzaga. So, just curious on your foremost thoughts. I'll start with Drew since he's already cranky. What are your foremost thoughts of this past weekend?
I think it was an awesome weekend of hoops, top to bottom. I had to work about through half of Sunday, but I did manage to get home and watch the back half of UNC Duke, which was a good game for the most part. I think delivered, big time players for the most part, made some big time plays outside of our guy Tyrese Proctor. I came home to a very angry brother during that game.
Well, Proctor played pretty good defense.
Yeah, but in a game like that, I feel like you gotta show up across the stat sheet if you're supposed to be one of the guys. In a winnable game. It was a winnable game. I mean, I think UNC was in control, but even down the stretch, you're like, Duke might pull this out. But that game was awesome. I think my favorite game of the day that I enjoyed watching from start to finish was Baylor Iowa State, which literally came down to a 0.1 seconds. But I thought that game was really great. I thought those are two teams that nobody's really talking about. I know we do, but two teams I think are super talented and right on that cusp of a top 10, AP ranking. Tennessee and Kentucky was competitive for a bit, but I felt like Tennessee for the most part was in control. I didn't get to watch Purdue, Wisconsin, which kind of sucked. I know that was a pretty good game. And then obviously I kind of capped off the night screaming at my TV with my Zags going against the Gales in a game that was just from start to finish, it pissed me off like 15 different ways. So I don't want to be that guy, but I think that when you don't play great and you don't put the dagger in somebody when you have the opportunity and the refs are incompetent, you're really, really, really you're probably not going to win a game. So it's a two things can't be true kind of statement. I think the refs are really bad, but they didn't deserve to win, but they didn't really have a shot to win.
Well, first of all, I thought the refs gave EK a break. He should have probably gotten about 2 technicals.
For sure. I think the refs completely lost control of that game across the board. There were bad calls all over the place, and that's where it gets frustrating. I mean, they called the foul on Marciulionis where Nembhard literally ran full speed into him, and I'm like, okay, at worst, you just kind of let that play out and see what happens. At best, it's probably a charge or an offensive foul. I just thought those refs had no control of that game. Within the first 10 minutes, it got away from them. And then they started making bad calls. They started reviewing everything to the point where it's like, now there's no flow.
That game could never end.
But
overall, talk about a game that couldn't end. Baylor and Iowa State went about a half hour late.
Yes.
Because even though it didn't go into overtime, because the refs were maybe too much in control. Like with probably about 4 minutes to go in that game, 4 Baylor starters had 4 fouls, and their head coach had been thrown out, and the bench had received another technical. And Baylor was home. I was surprised, the Gonzaga people actually weren't they were throwing stuff all over the court.
Yeah, like that upset me because I was like, you're going to get a technical, idiots. Like, right. Look, I again, the fan part of me wants to sit there and be like, the refs were bad. And I think they were. I do think they were across the game. But that team had a chance to bury them. They got up 8-0 against a team whose offense is not very good. And they could not push that lead to 15 or even 20. And at that point, it wouldn't have mattered. Instead, you let them climb back in. You don't take good shots. So, look, can't be a bandwagon fan. I've been blessed with a great run. I think this is a team that's a year away from being right back in the thick of being a really solid team. I mean, they have their whole bench is freshmen, and Steele Venters isn't out there. So you add up another year of those guys. Steele Venters comes back. They're always good for one or two transfers, maybe. I think they'll be fine. But this year, just clearly, they're gonna have to win the WCC tournament, or they're gonna have to go into Lexington and Moraga and win out. So, tall task, but overall, great basketball. Can't complain. If you like college basketball, it's a great weekend.
So, Caleb, what were your thoughts on the weekend?
I mean, definitely echo what Drew said. An incredibly fun weekend of basketball. I think I turned the TV on at like 10 or 11 out here in Denver, and then just like let it run and watched all the games. Had a bunch of buddies over to watch the games. I mean, as a Duke fan, I was pretty disappointed. But as somebody who, as we talked about at the beginning of the season, said North Carolina is going to be pretty good, watch out. Like, they are good. And it was just, I don't know. Yeah, great weekend of basketball. Super fun to see everybody play. I think both Iowa State and Baylor are super dangerous when it comes to the tournament. I feel like both of those teams have really solid identities. I feel like both of those teams have really good guard play. Kentucky looks, after everybody hyping them up about a month ago, they've been on a rough tear here in the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Lost three straight.
Yeah. And like, man, if Duke could have gotten anything out of anybody besides McCain and Roach, like they could have easily won the game. As Drew said, like super winnable game for Duke. And then even like I was talking to my brother, like we had the Houston Kansas game on that morning, and we turned it on a few minutes late, and Kansas is already up 10, and just kept that lead throughout the entire game. And then last night, Kansas loses to Kansas State. And just like outside of basically Purdue and UConn recently, like it really feels that any team can almost win any game. And there's just this huge group of, I don't even know, 20 to 30 teams that are all super talented, super competitive, but all have some very obvious flaws. And so it's just going to be really fun, I think, to see once we get into conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament, how these teams match up on the fly with each other. So great weekend. Excited going forward.
All right, you lead me into 2 points. One, I was driving the Kentucky bandwagon, and they've lost 3 straight. Now, losing to South Carolina was a big surprise to me, even though that was a road game. Losing in overtime to Florida wasn't a big surprise, and of course, losing at Tennessee, I expected, or losing against Tennessee at home, I expected. So, right now, I would throw Kentucky out of my Final Four and replace them with North Carolina. So, and I think Purdue, as you said, Purdue and UConn seem to be, right now it would be a disappointment if they didn't make the Final Four. And my other 2 teams would be Carolina and Tennessee. Still think Kentucky could turn that around. But interesting, what I thought was most interesting was leading up to those 4 top 10 matchups, plus Iowa State and Baylor was a top 25 matchup, was what happened the games before. And so you want to talk about trap games. Gamblers always talk about trap games, and basically means you're either looking ahead and or you're coming off a performance where you exceeded expectations or maybe had to exert an extra amount of effort. And a lot of times you lose before or after a really big game. So it happened in spades last week. UNC lost to Georgia Tech. UT lost at home to South Carolina. Purdue needed overtime to beat Northwestern at home. UK lost at home in overtime to Florida, and Wisconsin lost at Nebraska. So all those teams lost except for Purdue, which almost lost to Northwestern leading up to their big games. And then, of course, you mentioned Kansas last night takes it on the chin after they beat Houston. So I think after you play a game like that Houston game, there's a tendency, just a natural human tendency to say, take a breath and relax. And you know what's happening? 2 days later, you're at Kansas State, where it's crazy to play. The fans are just crazy. And they lost in overtime in a very close game. Another thing, I want to give a shout out to the Big 12 fans. Baylor was going to rush, or Kansas State was going to rush the court last night. Baylor coaching staff asked them not to, and they didn't. Well done. I don't know why they didn't want them to rush the floor, but they didn't, and the fans listened. The other thing was, during that Baylor game, I was getting angry. I was getting angry. I had no dog in the fight, and I'm getting angry at the refs. I mean, 4 Baylor starters have 4 fouls at home, and you threw out the coach, and you gave another technical to the bench 30 seconds later? Come on, man, you're out of control. And the Baylor fans, I expected them to all be giving the middle finger and throwing things onto the court, at one point, and they were not. The worst thing I saw them do, which usually isn't bad, is they were doing this, thumbs down. So well done to Baylor fans for acting civilized. So,
well, Rich, I mean, isn't that what fans go to games for? They go watch a bunch of like middle-aged balding dudes in striped shirts run up and down the court. That's what I go to the games for. I don't go to see like Jacoby Walter or Yves Missi. I don't want to see those guys. I don't want to see Ryan Nemhard or Graham Ike. I want to see a bunch of dudes.
My point was, I said to my wife during the game, I was like, oh my God, I had the wrong upbringing. I should have went to a conservative Christian college, because look at these kids. The worst thing they're doing is that you could even, if you were reading their lips, they weren't even swearing. They were just giving them the thumbs down. And I'm like, man, that is so well behaved.
Rich, did you watch? I know we talked briefly about Dayton last time we saw each other. Did you watch the UD Richmond game?
I did.
UD lost.
I did.
I mean, similar, like from a ref perspective, I think 2 minutes into the second half, both teams already had 5 fouls. And it was just the entire second half, the refs just dominated the play, and kind of a similar experience, I think, just from the refs taking over. And it's like, hey, are we going to actually let them play here, or are we just going to call fouls the whole time?
Right. And so some people would say to that, I don't know, a referee purist would say something like, a foul is a foul. And my response would be, a foul is a foul should not be the case. So there's probably a ton of fouls that aren't called in games. And the reason why they're usually not called is because they don't really affect the play. And I think that's what every ref has to ask himself, did it really affect the play? If you get rid of those stupid fouls that don't affect the play, then we have a good game. The one thing that can ruin basketball is a lot of fouls. And even at the end of the games, I've been thinking for years, we need to do something about this rule, where you can foul to get back into the game. That really just drags it out, and I don't like it. Nobody likes it, unless you're the team trailing at the time. Yeah.
What about the Elam ending?
Yeah, that's a possibility.
I don't know how it would work. Like, you'd have to think about implementation really for regular season stuff, I think. I mean, just for normal use, you'd have to really think about it for implementation.
It would screw up the record books. That's the big problem.
Like the previous I mean, I get, because games would be
some
different length.
Yeah, some games might last 3 hours, some games might last an hour, So, I don't think that would ever work. Also, rotations. Imagine your starters come out and do a blitzkrieg, and they score 40 points in what was in maybe his first team to 60, and your reserves don't get to play that much.
But the way that it would happen would be like at the 17-minute mark of the second half. So you play 17 minutes of the second half, and then you determine. Then you say, "Hey, let's." I
see where you're going. I see where you're going. Now that might work. Something like that.
So it would keep at least for the when the NBA had it for the All-Star game.
They will have They will have it this All-Star weekend too. At least for the young guys.
Okay.
The young guys play.
Yeah, they play. They still play like 70% of the quarter amount, and then they determine. It's like 8 more points than the team who's ahead is what the target is. So depending on where you set that number of how much they played in the second half, I think it would screw that up less.
I think the Rising Stars is actually going to have 4 teams in a tournament, and they're going to play first to 40.
That's fun.
Games. Yeah. Yeah. One rule I've always thought of is that basically if you don't go for the ball, if you just grab somebody's jersey or, you hit their arm, but, the ball's in the opposite hand or something like that, that's, inside of 2 minutes, that's an intentional foul. So not only do they get 2 shots, but they also get the ball. So there would be no advantage gained. You'd have to literally make a play on the ball. And a lot of times teams don't. They say to the ref, we're going to foul now. And wherever he touches them, the ref gives it to him. That could go away. And then you would have a lot less fouling. It still would be fouling, but a lot less. All right. So let's move on to injury news. Hold on to your hats, gentlemen. We got about, over a dozen guys to talk about, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. If you guys have any comments at the end, please feel free to throw them in. Starting off with a non-college player, Alex Sarr is back in action for Perth. We talked about him a few weeks ago. He didn't shut it down. Perth is in second place in the Australian NBL. Now, I notice his minutes aren't as much, so I haven't had a chance to watch him in those games, but it seems like they are limiting his minutes. But it was very nice to see him not shut it down, even though at least one major draft site is calling him the number 1 pick. Devontae Davis, Devo Davis, returns to Arkansas. I'm sure there was some negotiation there with Musselman about, I think maybe that was a leverage play. I think Arkansas, you pretty much put a fork in them at this point, but I'm hoping Devontae, just for his own personal draft stock, can play better. And Travion Brazil missed another game this weekend, and he's still out with a knee injury. They've given no update that I'm aware of. Last night, when Miami put up only 39 points against Virginia, by the way, I think that was the lowest total by a Miami Hurricanes men's team since 1946, I believe.
I think it was 38.
Okay, all right. Somewhere long time ago, before any of us were born. Keyshawn George, the freshman, big freshman, point forward, point guard, whatever you want to call him, injured an ankle and only got to play, I think, like 7 minutes. So no update on that. Of course, this continues to add to Miami can't just field. They can't get their best players out there all at the same time. But I think there's actually more to it than that. Maybe we can talk about Larrañaga and how he reacted to last night's game when I'm all done. Cody Williams, another lottery draft prospect, missed this weekend's game at Utah. Don't know why. No one said anything about an injury, but I'm assuming it was an injury. And no update. So he just didn't play against Utah, which was key. We expected Colorado to win. We thought they were finally, on their way to being healthy. And yeah, they lost at Utah in a key game, very key game. For tonight's game against Vanderbilt, Kentucky's probably going to be missing DJ Wagner and Trey Mitchell. Wagner's been out with an ankle injury. Trey Mitchell's got a back injury. Both are doubtful, though Calipari said over the weekend that he thought Wagner was close to returning. So this might be a game where Kentucky has a lot of depth. Vandy's not very good, and they're probably just playing it safe. Alex Caravan could play tonight against Butler. He missed this weekend's game against St. John's with an ankle injury, so that's good news for them. Keenan Carlisle missed the Arizona game this weekend with a quote-unquote upper body injury. Maybe Drew knows more about that. You know anything about that?
I don't. It's funny. My brother, I wasn't aware that he was out until my brother yesterday. We've had no power here for almost 2+ days, so I haven't been able to watch any games basically Sunday through Monday. My brother came in on his phone and his degenerate ass was like, "Hey, I'm looking to put a couple of player props down. You got any good ones for college basketball for betting?" And I was like, well, let me take a look at what you got here. And the Carlisle line was like 10.5 points over under. And I was like, oh, that's a great one. I would take the over on that for sure. And literally as I clicked on it, it was removed and I got the notification, and then I gave a notification like Carlisle listed as out, unavailable to like bet on. So I'm not 100% sure what happened there. The funny thing is, if he plays,
He was injured in the Arizona State game, which I did not see.
yeah,
So
I see. I didn't know he was out at all.
upper body could be anything. It could be shoulder,
Yeah.
it could be pec, it could be concussion.
It could be a concussion. Like a lot of times, sometimes they put. I know that some places will do like an upper body of it's anything like above the neck. They'll list as an upper body just because that's a little bit scarier too. So they just keep it. And the funny thing is, if he played in that game, I mean, Arizona really couldn't put him away. I mean, Maxime Reyno, I've been very critical of him, and I know we're getting a little off topic here, but man, that kid played his ass off. If Carlisle plays, Arizona might have been 0-2 against the Cardinals.
Wow. Yeah, Renault, I like his game. When he first came out, he was allowed to explore outside once in a while, take some jumpers. I haven't seen, they've been more using him really post-oriented this year. But he's right outside our top 200. So, yeah, I think he has potential. All right, moving on. Xavier Johnson of Indiana injured again. And part of the reason is this guy plays with reckless abandon. He's not a great shooter, and he attacks the rim fearlessly. But, man, he came down hard again and injured his elbow. Didn't play this weekend. Not so sure how long he's going to be out. That really hurts Indiana because they're so hurting at guard. So Seth Trimble will not play tonight versus Clemson for unknown injury. Jamarian Sharp did not play this weekend in Ole Miss's loss to Auburn for an undisclosed injury. He's questionable for tonight against South Carolina. Interesting enough, I'd like to talk about Ole Miss at some point because, man, we talked about over the summer, about how Ole Miss was going to be impossible to score against. They're anything but. They're a really great offensive team, but they stink defensively, very similar to Kentucky. All right, some sad news. Jerome Hunter, who was supposed to most likely miss this season with some undisclosed thing. Now, they never said it was an injury, and so I believe it was either heart or something else. But he had been practicing with the team, and during practice, he suffered an Achilles tear. So he is definitely done now. Xavier's had a run of injuries this year. Speaking of a run of injuries, all right, we'll start with the good news. Nathan Biddle, who's missed the past few games for Oregon, has resumed practicing and should be back this week for Oregon. In the meantime, it looks like Mookie Cook and backup guard Keyshawn Bartholomew are going to miss the rest of the season. So Cook only played a few games and then got re-injured his foot. Bartholomew had been a key backup, like 6-man type for he used to play for Colorado, now plays for Oregon. And both are out. And Jermaine Cousinard, one of their starting guards, got injured over the weekend against UCLA, but with an ankle, but he should be okay. So that wraps it up. The 2 points I wanted to talk about from this, and if you guys have anything to add, let me know. Let's start with Larrañaga's body language last night. What do you guys make of that?
I thought it was interesting because I feel like, you go back to last year, or the last 2 years where Miami's kind of made these nice little runs in the tournament and kind of, probably superseded expectations, at least to like the casual fan based on like their seedings and all that stuff. He's been kind of like the fun grandpa vibes, like the kind of like, like rally behind him and you're rooting for him because you got a team that's fun to watch. They're loaded at guard, and Larrañaga's kind of got this fun uncle, fun grandpa vibe. I mean, I'm willing to give a bit. I think some of it's probably at this point, there's just a level of frustration bubbling over, having been around, at Menlo, one of our coach, our head coach, one of our starters has basically been in and out of our lineup all year with nagging injuries. Like every time he comes back, he gets nicked somewhere else. And so I can imagine being on a team that you're aware of the talent you have. You're very confident in the talent you have, I would assume, but you can't piece it together because of injury. And not even like serious injury where it's like, man, we're going to lose this guy for the year. But like, okay, he's got a, he banged knees with somebody, he's got a bit of a bruising or sprains out for like small stuff that keeps a guy out for a game or two, and you just can't put it together. And then you give up, you score 38 points. I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he was just probably pretty fed up, in a game where George goes down, your star freshman, the big freshman goes down. You held at 38 points. All year long, it's been the same story of, okay, we get Wooga Poplar back with Nigel Pax out. Okay, we get Norchad O'Meara back, but Matthew Cleveland. And so I feel like maybe it's just got to a point where he was like, it kind of came to a head. And it's an embarrassing loss. I mean, scoring 38 points is embarrassing for a Division I college basketball team. That's that talented. We gave Pacific a lot of crap a couple of weeks ago when they scored 28, but Pacific, and no one's confusing Pacific for University of Miami's in terms of talent. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, from what we've seen, I think he was just fed up, and that the real Larrañaga is a much more maybe jovial person and more energetic. But it's been a rough year. As somebody who likes Miami, they're one of my favorite teams outside of the Zags to watch and have been for a couple of years. It's probably just a frustration boiling over. And I mean, at any point, you're a Power 5 program who was just in the Elite Eight or the Final Four a year ago, and you get held at 38 points. That's pretty embarrassing.
What'd you make of it, Caleb?
I did not get to see the game. I just saw the score, so I don't have anything to add here.
Well, what happened was, and I guess we should tell our listeners who didn't see the game, was basically, during the second half of that game is he just basically was like distanced himself from the players. He wasn't engaged. He just kind of sat on the bench with a blank stare. And then when they had timeouts, he didn't even get up to talk to the team during timeouts. Frustration or not, I don't think you can quit on a team like that. That's not a good message to be sending. Now, Larrañaga is probably a future Hall of Famer, so who am I to say? But I just don't see how that sends the right message. Quitting is not acceptable. And if your coach quits, then why shouldn't the players quit?
I'm not saying I'm a Hall of Fame level high school teacher, but I have done something pretty similar where like I'm trying to get the kids to do something. I'm trying to bring them back. I can't. And for whatever reason, just these like little pockets kind of keep popping up all over the place. I've only done this a couple of times. It's like pretty extreme when I do it. And I'll say to the class, I'll be like, all right, fine. I'm done teaching. And I go into the back, I sit in the back, put my feet up on my desk and bring a book out and just start reading in the middle of class. And they're always kind of like, wait, what? And I mean, to Drew's point, like it does seem to be something similar to at least what I'm thinking, where it's like, I know what the kids should be doing. I know that they're capable of doing it. And it might just take something a little different, a little unique, a little out of the box to kind of get them to focus in. I think the next couple of games will be really able to tell, is this like he's just kind of giving up? I don't think so. Or is it just like he's trying to do something different to kind of get his team's attention to do things that they know they should be doing? And I don't know. I think we'll see, but it does kind of remind me of some of the ways that I treat 15-year-olds.
Well,
I don't think he's a front runner. He's been doing this long enough, like you said, Rich. I mean, he's got a Hall of Fame case, and he's had a lot of successes last year. And this is a team with a lot of guys that he's had for a while. Like, it's not like these are all freshmen. Like, a lot of these guys, his big star players for the most part have been in his program.
Four of their top 6 players from last year returned.
So I do kind of agree with Caleb's thought process of like maybe he was just trying. I don't know. Hey, maybe you figure it out, guys. I don't have an answer right now. Whatever I'm giving you, you're not responding to. We got 38 points. Maybe you guys try to figure out. I'm not condoning the picture of him sitting on the bench with his arms crossed while they're in a huddle is a little extreme to me. But it's like, I don't know if for a guy who's been doing it for so long and has had success and has his case, like, If Larrañaga was like a front runner who was only that guy when they're winning, I think we would have known that about him before. Bad look for sure, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
I could see Popovich doing that.
Yeah.
Right. Like
sure.
think about some of the great coaches, whether it be Saban or Belichick or Pop or Spoelstra. Like sometimes they do these kind of like weird out of the box things to kind of get their team to focus in and get their team's attention in a different way. And it's not like a giving up. It's a calculated tool to get them to focus. And as Drew said, like, it's a Hall of Fame guy who's been doing it for a long time. He's been successful at lots of different places. It's a group of guys that he knows. So I'll give him a little leeway. I'll give him some trust.
I will. The thing that worries me is his age. You know, he's well into his 70s. And what if Jim Larrañaga isn't Jim Larrañaga that we've seen? You know, and when you get that age, especially if you have like a neurological issue, you can go down a hill pretty quickly. And I'm just wondering out loud, I'm not saying I have any evidence of this. All I know is old people can hit the skids pretty quick. And I just wonder if, you know, maybe Jim hasn't been up to his best. Maybe that's why the team's not performing. And maybe this was another symptom of that. Now, that's all conjecture, but I hope that's not the case, obviously.
You hear that, aggregators? Let the aggregators come for us.
Yes. By the way, our transcript now on Apple, we will now be transcripted. So if you say bad words, which we don't, but like, for example, if we said fuck or something like that, it would get transcripted. So just wanted you let me know. All right. The other thing that made, you know, this injury update was, you know, I was wondering, would Jamarian Sharp made any difference against Auburn? For those that didn't watch the game, Mississippi jumped out to a pretty good lead against Auburn at home. The place had set a record for like the second straight twice in 1 week for most fans at a Mississippi game, and that place holds over 10,000, so it was crazy. And they jumped off to like a 13-point lead, and it looked like, you know, they were gonna, you know, beat Auburn. And at halftime, the lead had shrunk some. I forget the exact number. And then in the second half, just Auburn scored at will against them, a lot on the inside. And we're talking about a team that had Sharp and Musa Cisse, and Cisse played a lot, and Sharp was out with an injury. I don't know if Sharp would have made a difference, but, you know, really, Mississippi has been an offensive team all year, which is weird for a Chris Beard team. I expected this team to be winning games like 60-55. And they're winning games like 85-80. And then the other night, you know, I don't know how many points they gave up to Auburn, but it was a lot. And it was all on the inside. You know, they just get Cisse away from the basket, and just once he was away from the basket, they just drive in there and score. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about in the notebook is basically, I went down last night and I was like, who is really still in this mix? And so I divided each teams in all the conferences as teams I think are in. They're just in. And then I thought, then I had teams that are on the bubble as an at-large. And then I had teams that could actually surprise and knock out somebody by winning their conference. They're that good enough. So, for example, if we look at the A10, I have Dayton being in, Richmond and VCU as bubble teams, and then I have St. Bonaventure, UMass, and St. Joe's as teams I think are talented enough to win the A10 tournament and probably knock somebody off. I also looked and thought of who I thought had the minimum bids and the maximum bids. And the reason I did this is, you know, and it's not just because Drew's a Gonzaga fan, but, you know, everyone was basically saying now Gonzaga has to win their tournament to get in. And I'm like, is that really true? And I don't think it is. I think that there are a couple conferences here that are kind of going to be battling to get an extra spot, with the A10 being one. I think the A10 could get one, maybe two. I think the Missouri Valley could get one or two. I think the West Coast Conference could get one or two. And then you have teams right now like the ACC and the Pac-12 where they're saying they're only going to get three. But I'm thinking it's more likely they're going to get four. At least one of them will get four. At the same time, I'm not so sure that, you know, the SEC is going to get eight. And yeah, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Oh, what it came down to, there was like 125 teams, I believe, on this list. And And I think I put the numbers here somewhere, didn't I? Bear with me, folks. Yeah, I had 56 teams in yellow, meaning that they're in. And I had 27 in green, which are the bubble teams. That means there are 27 teams fighting for 12 at-large spots. So less than half of my bubble teams will make it. And I also, in the rankings in here, I use from Sports Reference, which from what I could see by comparing are similar to Ken Palm. For example, like Sports Reference also has Alabama and BYU as top 10 teams right now, which I don't necessarily believe. So what are you guys thoughts about this list, and what conclusions can we draw from it?
I mean, looking at it off the rip, I think the teams you have in yellow here, Rich, are all, for the most part, I think the general consensus. Like, I think those are pretty. Like, I'm not seeing any team in here where I'm like, no, I think those teams are either have built the resume at this point to be a lock, tournament champions or not, or they have a very good.
Well,
chance
no, I'm not saying that, because, for example, I have Samford in yellow. They also play in the same conference as UNC Greensboro, who Greensboro beat Arkansas. That was the team to beat Arkansas.
Yes, they beat Arkansas.
That conference is only getting one bid.
I see what you're saying.
And I just think Samford is so superior to Greensboro. I have them in yellow. But
I see what you're saying.
That conference is only getting one bid, so Samford should be the team.
I see what you're saying.
On the other hand, somebody like I think like TCU. The last team I have in yellow in the Big 12. I think they're pretty much a lock at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going off that, like, yeah, every team I see in yellow, at least for the bigger programs, like, I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of Colgate basketball or Samford basketball or Greensboro basketball. I just don't have the time.
We can't admit that.
You can cut that. But I'm just going to say, being honest, as busy as I am with my own college hoops team, looking at a lot of these teams in yellow, at least along the bigger conferences and even the bigger mid-majors, I think are pretty – I agree. Thank you for putting my Zags in green. I think they still have a shot. There's still a path, but I mean, I think it's just an interesting year because I mean, Caleb said it earlier. Like, outside of Purdue and UConn, I don't think there's any team that I'd comfortably can, like, at any given point. There's so many teams that are just beating everybody. Everyone's losing to everyone. Everyone's beating everyone. So it's like, well, it makes for great college basketball. It does make this process of why you have 27 teams in green for 12 spots pretty obvious because. I mean, again, I'll use my Zags as a reference point. If they hit over the course of this season 7 more threes, just 7 more threes over the course of this season, they have a completely different resume, and we're probably viewing them as a completely different team with wins over San Diego State, St. Mary's, and that's 7 to 10 more threes. And there's other teams that are on here where it's like, Florida's one where I know you have them here. It's like we've talked about how many overtime close games have they lose where it's like if you give them 3 more points in 5 games, we might be looking at them as like a team that they're a lock,
right?
So
right.
I think it's pretty spot on. I don't see anything here where I'd be like I don't agree with that because again I think it's just a year where outside of the top 10, not even top like 5 teams, there's so much validity where I think there's just a notion of anybody beats anybody. You can't really say for a fact that certain teams are locks. Because they could go on a losing streak and lose 6 in a row in a tough conference or go win 5 in a row and pull a bunch of upsets off. You just never know.
All right. What are your thoughts, Caleb?
I've got nothing crazy to add. Like, I think I don't think we have the time, but, especially once we start to get closer to the NCAA tournament, like to dig into some of these conferences and parse out, like, man, is the SEC really going to get 8 schools? Are they going to hit that? Like, is the Big 12 going to get 10? I mean, obviously
they might.
Can't happen. Both of those two things can't happen, but like, man, those are some tough conferences. Like even the Pac-12 has a lot of. They got 10 schools on this list. You project that they won't get more than and Lenardi, right? Like all those people project that they won't get more than at most 5, but
right.
Tough conferences like the Big 10. Slated for 4 to 6. I think they should probably only get 3. But
Yeah, right now I have Michigan State as in. And
I was questioning that.
Right. I was questioning myself, but according to the rankings, they're the 15th best team in the country.
The rankings don't watch basketball. That's all.
Yeah, I know. We
15 is insane.
we talked a ton about that last week, but
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me
unfortunately,
of Oklahoma earlier in the year. It was like Oklahoma just like didn't lose because they had this terrible non-conference schedule, and so they get bumped all the way up into the top 10, and then it's like they start playing some teams that we all agree are actually really good: Kansas, Houston, Iowa State, Texas. Like even Texas, I think is better than Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's still rated higher.
Yep.
But it's like the rankings and the computer doesn't always watch. They don't.
Unfortunately, the committee seems to rely on it heavily, and if we do get Mike DeCourcy back on the show, you will hear him defend these things. And I'm going to give you a good example. You know, Drew and I probably talked too much about it last week about the computer rankings and how they can be flawed. But a perfect example is Mississippi. Again, I'm not an old Miss fan or something, but they're a curious case this year. They are ranked in these rankings at 67. Florida is at 38. Texas A&M is at 51. So both Florida and A&M are significantly better than Ole Miss. Because of their out-of-conference schedule and because they actually beat at least one really good team, like one top 25 team. Here's the interesting thing, though, that's not being considered. This is why I think the computers are flawed. In the last 2 weeks, Ole Miss has beaten both Florida and Texas A&M. They've beaten them both. And yet the computers still have Ole Miss below based on what happened in November and December. Now, to me, that's insane. And trust me, I've written programs to do this. I did it for football. I had Sagarin ratings very similar for football, and they were on my football website when I did that years ago, and they were on there for 10 years for anybody to see. I did them for college and pro, then I switched just to pro. I know how these programs work, and I know sometimes you're going to get a result. But this year, they just seem totally asinine. I mean, Alabama, number 4, BYU, number 5 in the country. I mean, anybody who watches basketball knows that those two teams are really good teams. And they're probably top 20, top 30 teams. But they're not 4th and 5th. They will not be in the Final Four. Now, interesting enough, and maybe one of you guys want to
watch Alabama go crazy in the NCAA tournament and make the Final Four now.
You know, they could. And I'll tell you why, because both teams can shoot the threes. And I'm curious, both teams live and die with the threes. And I'm curious, I bet you BYU and Alabama are at the probably top 20 in the country for both 3-point attempts, 3 points made. So yeah, those teams can beat anybody, but they also can lose to almost anybody. And they have serious flaws starting, with their bigs. So, yeah, I don't want to belabor it because we kind of belabored it last week, but that's when I was looking at Ole Miss and looking at the rankings and knowing that they had just beaten Florida and A&M, that kind of blew my mind.
Are there any schools that we have listed as green that y'all want to talk about for either like reasons why you think they will make the tournament or won't make the tournament?
I think Memphis is a curious case. I mean, here we had a top 25 team, and now they're out of the top 25. I mean, what they lose like 4 out of the last 5.
4 out of the last 5 to all unranked opponents, I believe.
And their power rankings down to 75th. So right now, theoretically, the only team that would make the tournament right now, I would think, would be Florida Atlantic. But I don't know what Lenardi's saying about that. But Memphis.
I would say they're probably on the. I would assume that they're probably on the outside looking in right now, and then. We'll see how they do over the next couple of weeks to see if they can bolster some of that and get back in.
I agree. They've been I think they peaked so early. I think there was a point where we were looking at them and like there was the talk of this team's really talented, they could go on a run, but it's kind of been the case with Memphis over the last couple of years where it's like the athleticism is there, the raw talent is there, but there's just something in the water where these guys just they can't string it together. And I mean, you look at some of the teams in green here and you're like, yeah, maybe they don't have the best resume in terms of like big wins, but they've been kind of consistently here. And I'm like, can't be up here. And I mean, Memphis has 4 straight bad losses, or 4 of the last 5 like bad losses. So I agree with Caleb. I think out of all the teams in green, the one that I'm most like, yeah, they're probably out. And if you told me that a month ago, I'd be pretty shocked. It's probably Memphis.
Yeah,
I'd be pretty shocked if Colorado State doesn't make it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially a month ago, right? Like a month ago, if you had said Colorado State doesn't make the NCAA tournament, I think we'd all be pretty shocked.
Yeah. And that's a team I really think it's probably in. I had to make some decisions. So where the yellow meets the green, I probably should have had them in a different color. So yeah. But I do agree. I agree Colorado State's in. I kind of think Gonzaga's in. And of course, this weekend will go a big way toward that too.
The only thing saving them is they don't really have a bad loss. I mean, Santa Clara's not a great one, but
it's not terrible. It's not terrible.
It's not terrible. And I mean, if you lose to St. Mary's, Purdue, UConn, San Diego State, and Santa Clara, and then you compare it to a team like Memphis. Now Memphis has better wins, but you compare it to a team like Memphis and the losses they've had. It's like, what's better? Is it the more consistently solid, or the really high peaks but the really low valleys? So I think if they can pick up wins, regardless of Kentucky, if they can pick up a win at St. Mary's and knock San Francisco off at San Francisco and avenge the Santa Clara loss, and depending on who they face in the tournament, in the conference tournament, I think they can get an at-large case. It's going to be tough, but we'll see.
What would be interesting?
For the record, Lenardi has Memphis this was as of this morning. He's got Lenardi in next 4 out.
They're Memphis in next 4 out, right?
Yes. So Memphis.
Where does he have Gonzaga?
10th.
A 10 seed?
No, like 10th in line to get in. Like they're 10 teams out.
So he has Memphis ahead of Gonzaga.
Yeah. So his first 4 out are Cincinnati, St. John's, Wake Forest, and Colorado. That's the first 4 out. The next 4 out is Villanova, Memphis, Oregon, and Providence. And then the next 4 out, so teams 11 to 14 out, Xavier, Gonzaga, Nevada, and Kansas State.
Okay. Computers love Gonzaga, and they don't like Memphis. And to me, if we watch that game on a neutral court, that would be a toss-up game.
Yeah, well, I think that's the issue with the computer in general is like it doesn't do a great job. Like I think it has a hard time calculating like good losses, bad loss. Like I think there's just like that where you don't watch it. Like I said, there's an eye test element to where it's like it's not just the win and loss. Like they were gonna probably lose to UConn. They're the 2 best teams in the country. They played both of them, but they were competitive and had UConn down at the half, or had Purdue down at the half, and were within striking distance of UConn for a good chunk of that game. It never got like really out of hand. So if it makes you feel any better, I see him in green. So Rich, you have faith. I have faith as well. They're gonna win the damn tournament for the WCC, and once March Madness happens, baby, you never know.
All right.
I love the confidence.
So for our next topic in our notebook, it's kind of like a mailbag question, but we'll just go to it right now. Because every time Alabama wins a big game or they sign a decent recruit, I hear from at least a dozen Alabama, maybe it's the same dozen. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to who's sending them to me, but and I rarely respond because there's no point. But I it's been happening enough, when Alabama beat Auburn, oh my God, did I hear from them? And then when they beat Mississippi State, now come on guys, Mississippi State, I mean, what are they, 2-3 games under 500 in conference? They beat Mississippi State really handily. I heard from them again. I'm like, what am I going to do? Every time you win, now I'm going to hear from you. It's not like I tweet about Alabama every day. So what happened was last summer, at some point, I'm thinking it was June, I tweeted that Alabama may not be relevant again anytime soon. Now, this is coming off their number one, being ranked number one majority of the season and being the heavy favorite to win the NCAA tournament. Of course, they lost in the Sweet 16, but it's also on top of the Brandon Miller incident. And of course, I think everyone on the show was highly critical. Caleb wasn't with us at the time, was highly critical of the Alabama administration and Coach Nate Oates for the way they handled the situation, or more, a better way to put it might be say not handle the situation. And that to me was very upsetting because someone died. And it basically seemed like, yeah, the people who pulled the trigger and were directly responsible got put in jail, but people who helped them, nothing happened to them. And Alabama wanted to act like, oh, it's no big deal. He just dropped the gun off. It's like, blows my mind still to this day. So, and at the time, Jaden Bradley had left. Quinterly had left. Miller moved on to the NBA. Clowney moved on to the NBA. What they had coming back basically was Mark Sears, right? I mean, that was the big piece they had coming back. Then they signed Aaron Estrada. Okay, good player. But that seemed like all they had at the time. They didn't have Grant Nelson yet, as far as I know, when I tweeted that, because I think it would have definitely changed my mind. And also the recruiting class looked so-so. I think they added a recruit late in the process, who that was Stevens, or is it Stevenson? I forget.
I think it's Stevenson. Yeah, Jaron Stevenson.
Yeah, Jaron Stevenson. So now he I think he was late in the game too, and I don't even know if he was on the team at the time. And the weird thing about him was, depending on where you look, some people had him like around 40 in the recruiting rankings, and some people had him like not even in their top 100. So I don't. Did he reclassify, Caleb? Do you know? Is that why his ratings were so wildly crazy?
No, give me 1 second and I'll see
All
what
right.
I can.
While we're looking this up. So basically, I said I didn't know if Alabama basketball is going to be relevant again, because it looked like Mark Sears and Aaron Estrada. And of course, they also had Rylan Griffin coming off a solid freshman season. So they maybe had three good guards at the time, but the rest was the fill-in. And to me, this certainly wasn't going to be a number one team. Certainly wasn't going to be the type team that was going to win the SEC. Maybe I kind of overstated it when I said I don't know when they're going to be relevant again. But I thought that a cloud would be looming over Nate Oates, and I thought, to be honest, I thought more was going to come of this situation. I thought maybe the NCAA would look into it, or news reporters would look into it. Nothing. Everybody just has swept it under the rug, and that has really surprised me, because there's more to this story, folks, and there are people who could talk, but no one's really tried to pry it away from them. Yeah. So I hear from Alabama fans all the time as if I root against them. Like as if somehow I am personally hurt when Alabama wins games. I will admit I can't root for Nate Oates anymore. And I will admit I'm not happy with the Alabama administration. But I hold nothing against the kids on the court. The only player that I hold something against is Brandon Miller, and he's no longer playing for Alabama. I have Grant Nelson probably ranked higher than any other draft site out there. I have Mark Sears on our draft board. Go find another draft board that has Mark Sears on it. So my whole point being to all these Alabama fans, I don't root against your team. I have nothing against Alabama players. It's just what Nate Oates and the administration did, I found this to be despicable. And the fact that you guys can overlook that and don't get to where I'm coming from is kind of, I don't know, unsettling. Though I will say all the Alabama fans who have tweeted to me have been respectful. They haven't been really, nasty or anything. So that's been nice. It's just, I don't root against your team. and yeah, and if I say the computer ranking is off, it's not because I have anything against the team. It's I say the same thing about BYU. So yeah, so I'm just responding to a shitload of comments that I've gotten over time that eventually I decided just to respond to. So I don't know what you guys think of the situation. But you understand where I was coming from when I tweeted that tweet, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's twofold. I think like take everything away that happened off the court, like they lost a lot. Like like fundamentally they lost a lot. Like you can't tell me that if you were the day after when all the dust settled and before Nelson had committed and all that stuff, like if you thought that this team was going to be a 1 seed again and be a heavy favorite, there's no way. You lost your two best NBA prospects left, your two guards left, like and then you add that overhang. So I don't think it was a major mark and like or a major like you weren't talking so down on this program they never have a shot. And it's like, look at them this year. Does anybody think if you watch Alabama, think they're a powerhouse program that's Final Four bound? I'm like this. And if you compare this team to last year's team,
yeah, it's not close.
It's not close. Like I'm not really a Grant Nelson guy. There was a part of me near the end of his recruitment because he was like the last big fish where I was like, hey, the Zags are kind of on his radar. The raw numbers look pretty good, but now having seen him in that Alabama role, he's not really the guy. He's kind of just a shot chucker. Shoots way too many threes for my liking, but we don't need to get into Grant Nelson conversation. I think it was a valid point, and I think it just goes back to like the metrics are what they are. Like I've watched every Zags game for the most part this year, and I'm able to admit that, man, this team, but the metrics love them. The metrics think that they're like a top 30-ish team still.
Top 20.
Top 20. And I'm able to say with a very clear conscience, I think that they, from a pure talent standpoint, belong in the tournament because I think on any given day they have the talent to get by most teams, maybe not the top 5 or so. But like, so it's not a knock on them, but like, come on, there's no way you look at that team and think that area or that team is on the same page as UConn, Tennessee, Purdue, UNC. When Kentucky's playing their best basketball and Alabama's playing their best basketball, I don't think it's really close who the better team is. So I don't think it's a bad take. And it's like if your mark of how great we are is we're the 18th ranked team in the nation and have been kind of fluttering around that 20 to 15 ranking all year, and that's your mark of how dominant you are. It's like, I mean,
well, they do lead the SEC right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
but I think that's a conference that cannibalizes itself, and I think that's those super conferences that are really loaded, especially the top 25 teams. Like, look at the Big 12; it cannibalizes itself. Like, there's how many? Kansas has 3 conference losses, and it's like because they have to play a Kansas State who is still a decent team, a top 50-ish team in the country. So I think it's. I've seen the tweets, and I don't think anybody's been out of pocket. But I also think that like if you really watch college basketball and you watch this team, you compare it to last year's team, you see what they lost at the time the tweet was made. I think it's a pretty valid point. But I mean, that's fans. They're going to get their.
Yeah, what I don't get, and I added reap what you sow because I was referring to. I thought that this was people not going to Alabama was backlash from the Brandon Miller situation. And I thought the reason why maybe guys left was backlash from the Brandon Miller situation, where they could have stayed. And so I just thought, okay, we've never heard the full story. We know there's more to this story, but maybe people on the inside knows more to this story and they're avoiding Alabama, and that was my conclusion. But, if I say a player is not a good shooter, does that mean I don't root for him, or I'm not supposed to root for anybody, to be honest, but, just because I say something doesn't mean that that's what I want. If I say so-and-so can't shoot, doesn't mean I don't want him to be able to shoot. And that's the way they're treating this, is as if I'm some kind of like Auburn fan or something that just trashes Alabama all the time, which is not the case. All right.
I'm going to play like a little bit of devil's advocate, just from the sense of like one of the things that I think is beautiful about college sports that makes it so different from professional sports is that you're rooting for the program. Yeah. Like these guys who are coming, these fans who are coming at you, they're not necessarily Nate Oat fans. They're not necessarily Brandon Miller fans. They're not necessarily Grant Nelson fans. They're Bama fans. Like, sure, they want Nate Oats to be successful because he's like there for Alabama, right? Like, but they are Alabama fans. To like, I'm gonna root for who I'm gonna root for. I've got my teams, my college teams that I'm gonna root for, and it almost doesn't matter who the coach is or who the players are. I'm gonna root for that. I'm gonna root for them. And professional sports just isn't really that way. And so I think that's one of the things that makes really college beautiful. And then to kind of push back to like Drew's point about your metric being you're a top 20 team, look how successful you are. 5 years ago, Bama wasn't a top 20 team. Right? Like I really believe that they have taken a step up as far as programs go in the last 5 years. And the fact that they were able to lose all the guys that they lost, and then you're right, like the team's not as good. And I think if you were to get a Bama fan in a room with a drink or two, like they'd be honest with you that their team just isn't as good. But the fact that they were able to weather the storm to some extent, they lost all these guys, they had all this turmoil, but then they were able to get whatever you want to say about Grant Nelson. Like they were able to get one of the higher profile transfers. Aaron Estrada's a really talented guy. Stevenson, I couldn't quite figure out like why you saw him rated at all of these different levels, but like he went on an unofficial visit to Duke. He went on an unofficial visit to North Carolina. He went on an official visit to Virginia, and then he chose Bama. Sam Walters is the top 100 guy, a 4-star. They've got 3 top 50 guys coming next year. Like the fact that they have weathered the storm and kept going and kept building, like that's what, if you're a Bama fan and you're like, hey, we took the next step and then we're able to weather a storm and stay there. Like, I think that's a huge thing to be proud of for a program. If you're like rooting for your team, you're rooting for your program.
Right. But
I think if you're a fan, you can separate. Like, man, I want Alabama to be successful.
Let's talk about a different sport, the KC Chiefs. I mean, they've had a couple of children beaters or wife beaters on there, and one of them stayed on the team for a while, Tyreek Hill, and was very integral into the Chiefs' rise to being, one of the best teams in football. But I wasn't happy about that. And when he went to the Miami Dolphins, I was like, yay, he's gone.
But you still would have defended the Chiefs.
No, I wouldn't defend them. I'd root for them.
There you go.
I'd root for them, but I certainly, if somebody said, well, I don't like the Chiefs because they have Tyreek Hill on the team, I'd be like, yeah, I get that.
If somebody came and said, oh, man, the Chiefs, this was like 2 years ago, and said they were talking about, the Chiefs aren't going to be relevant. You'd be like, wait, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, we're still relevant.
Well, this all came down to Oates and Oates' reputation and how people felt about him and how, if they wanted to be associated with him. And we know that there have been dirty coaches throughout the history of college basketball, and it's never stopped them from being successful. And I should have remembered that. It just doesn't stop. The dirty ones and the clean ones, it doesn't really matter as long as they win. And Oates is a smart guy, and he has an interesting system, and he has an NBA-like system. So it's going to be attractive to people. And so as long as he wins, this stuff is not going to catch up with him. And I should have known that. So it was naive of me to think that what was right and what was wrong would actually come out here. But at the same time, if this happened to my alma mater or teams that I've liked since I was a child, like Villanova or Notre Dame, I'd be ashamed. And I'd want that coach gone.
Yeah. Fair. I just think there is an element where I think in the heat of all of it, the Alabama fans, and again, this is not all of them, they're all over the country. But like there was kind of this like almost nonchalantness about it. I mean, there was T-shirts and
Oh yeah,
Miller
yeah.
coming out and doing the gun pat, like the pat down. So there wasn't, it was just very distasteful. And obviously
Completely agree.
we as people, like, negative news sells. So we're not gonna show the people condoning it. We're gonna show the guy who shows up in the t-shirt that, with the crosshairs on it saying keep shooting Miller. You know what I mean? Like, those are the people we're
Yeah.
gonna showcase.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, again, I think Caleb is right. I think Rich is right. It's like just this balance of, like, you're never going to truly be able to gauge something like that because we're always going to focus on the most extreme parts of the fandom. And there's so many people in the middle that are like, I went to Alabama. I love their sports. What happened was awful. I can't condone it. I'm glad that, the player who was most directly involved obviously was removed, but come March, when they're making a run and there's a final, there's a 2-second buzzer beater that goes in for the win, I'm going to have my, Roll Tide shirt on and I'm going to be clapping and cheering. And it's hard to, I think, differentiate that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if I was in an Alabama's fan's shoes, especially if I was like a contributor to the program, I would have been, I've been putting pressure on the administration to get rid of Nate Oates. So yeah, and as long as he was coach, I couldn't be totally proud of my program. That doesn't take away from what the players do on the court or the current players.
right.
They have nothing to do with this. So yeah, even Nick Saban kind of expressed his disgust over this whole thing, and who's to say that maybe that contributed to why he retired? I mean, I know that's probably a reach, but it's possible. Yeah. All right, folks. So we're going to move on to our stock report. We got 4 guys that are hot, 4 guys that are cold. And we'll start off with Kentucky's Rob Dillingham. He has, I think he has flourished with some little extra minutes thanks to the DJ Wagner injury. Last 3 games, I think Wagner's missed those last 3. He's played over 25 minutes in each game, put up 16, 20, and then 35 against Tennessee. Interestingly enough, all 3 losses. Now, we often hear a lot about his teammate, Reed Shepherd, and we've kind of semi-debated like who's better, Dillingham or Shepherd. But I think, they're different players. I think we're learning at this point. I think we have a better feel for who they are. And overall, Shepherd's averaging, coming off the bench and only averaging 24 minutes a game, averaging 15.3 points. He's shooting 48 from the floor, 41 from deep, 74 from the free throw line, chipping in 3.1 rebounds and 3.9 assists, 1.3 steals, and only 1.9 turnovers. Caleb, we're going to start with you. What do you make of Dillingham? He's certainly he's pretty much been hot all season, but I think it really stood out in the Tennessee game.
I mean, I think you hit it spot on to start off with, right? Like, he just benefits from more playing time. He is a player, I think, that really needs the ball in his hands to be successful. I think he's a capable off-ball shooter, but I don't necessarily think he moves super well off the ball offensively. I really like his point of attack defense. I am still, I think, lower on him for the NBA, mostly just due to concerns of size and strength. And I think it's going to be really tough for him to get I think his shot diet in the NBA is going to be difficult. And his free throw shooting over the course of the year has been pretty up and down. His attempts at the line per game has been pretty up and down. He's had only 2 games all year where he's gotten more than 5 free throws in a single game,
which is kind of surprising. It's a little surprising. Yeah. I mean, he really can be so effective, attacking the rim.
Yeah, and so I love watching him play. I really wish. This is a tangent, and then we can get back, and I'll let you guys throw your thoughts on with Dillingham. But with NIL, I think we've really seen NIL be successful for non-NBA bigs who are able to be kind of this larger than life, lovable on-campus character that NIL really attaches to, the local community really attaches to, and so they end up staying a little bit later. Dillingham is somebody that I would love to see stay 2-3 years, because I'm just lower on his ceiling at the next level, and I think he is a great and such a fun college basketball player. I told this story, I'll tell it quickly, I think one of my first podcast episodes on, but Trey Burke, great high school player. He was Mr. Basketball in the state of Ohio, great college player. And like, he's physically stronger than Dillingham. Still to this day, he comes to pro-ams in Ohio as like a mid 30-year-old and destroys these semi-pro guys, destroys these guys who are 22 and are incredible athletes playing in college currently. Like, his skill level is still so high, and he can't make an NBA roster. And so, yeah, I love Dillingham in college. It's been so fun to see him blossom over the last week or so with more time. Still just a smidge lower as far as his NBA prospects go.
So as a lottery spot prospect, which he's generally considered right now, are you buying or selling?
I would take him, like, from me personally, I would take him at the end of the lottery, because I think that's where you tend to, like, he to me is just a situational fit kind of guy. He's going to be really good on a team that already has a big wing as their primary ball creator, and he's able to guard point guards. Because I do think there's some tenaciousness off the ball, there's some tenaciousness as a point of attack defender,
Right.
but he's going to get hunted relentlessly in the playoffs. So I don't think he can play huge minutes in the playoffs because of that size on defense. And then his ability to, like, be a second side creator, to attack, his ability to change directions, both going north, south, and east, west, is going to be super magnified if he's able to play off the ball and be that second side creator. And I think you're just much more likely to find teams at the end of the lottery that are going to have that than you are at the top of the lottery.
Gotcha. Drew, you buying or selling Rob Dillingham as a lottery prospect?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Caleb on the kind of the where I would buy is at the end of the lottery, because again, this is the type of guy where when you think, a top 5 pick, even like that top tier, that you're talking about guys that you're going to come and like kind of hopefully build your team around or be like a really key foundational piece of your roster. And I'm like, from what I've seen from Rob is he's on offense, he's dynamic. I mean, you saw it against Tennessee. He can put points up in a hurry. He's got 3-level scorer to him. I still think his 3-point shot kind of comes and goes, but there's like a 3-level scorer there. But he's not entirely a one-trick pony. Like, he does put up assist numbers, but I don't really think of him as like a playmaker. I think of him more as like kind of a secondary playmaker. And he's on a Kentucky team that's pretty talented everywhere, so it's, I think, easier to generate assists when you're passing the ball to other 5-star guys or veteran players like a Trey Mitchell or an Antonio Reeves. So at the end of the lottery, I think he's a buy, because that's where you kind of find those teams that maybe trade up in there that are already kind of more well-built and constructed where he can fit more into a role. But I just don't know, like, would I take him high enough, at the top 7 or 5 pick, where it's like, you pick Rob Dillingham, you're basically saying we are going to be, if not the dude, like kind of the Robin to somebody's Batman on a team that hopefully can make the playoffs and be a contender at some point. And from what I've seen, he's not big enough, he's not strong enough, and he's not multifaceted enough to fill that role. He's kind of like, he's going to be able to get you buckets, but he's not a great shooter. He's not a great playmaker. I think Caleb is spot on with, like, when he's engaged on the ball, like, he's more locked in. He's able to kind of hold his own, but so much of basketball now, especially with how the court is so spaced, is about hunting mismatches and putting guys relentlessly in ball screen situations, getting switches onto them where you punish people. I mean, we have a player on our Menlo team that kind of actually fits this type where, like, he's only 6 foot tall, but he's a pretty solid 3-level scorer, and on the ball he can defend, but he gets hunted in, pick and roll situations, and they try to get mismatches to where they can post him up, or they catch him sleeping on off the ball where he gets backdoored. And I think if you were to get him in that, like, I know 15 is technically out of the lottery, but if you get him in that 15 to maybe like 11, 12 range, you could get a pretty solid piece that hopefully the offense carries over, and maybe he's able to develop more into a combo guard that can pick up some playmaking duties. But if you were going to spend, a top 7 front half of lottery pick, I think you're getting more of a specialist than you are a kind of cornerstone.
two teams that I think he'd be really fun on right now. I'm looking at Tankathon and their mock draft. And so the draft order gets updated after every game. So the draft order is based on what it would be if the draft was today. At 10 through 15, so kind of the end of the lottery, you've got Portland. OKC has 2 picks right now in that 10 to 15 range. The Pelicans and then Miami Heat at 15. And I think Portland has way too many young guards, but both OKC, New Orleans, and Miami, he could be super interesting in. Just as a special, like, man, him and Cason Wallace coming off the bench as a backcourt would be super fun. I don't know how much Miami would need him after trading for Rozier and now having Rozier and Hero, but like I think their ability to build a defensive infrastructure to hide some guys and to have Jimmy Butler and Bam kind of initiate the offense. And then the Pelicans just have so many pieces to play with. Like, I think another just like really interesting, he might get lost developmentally there. Whereas like OKC and Miami might just be better for him developmentally. But I think that range of interesting offense, big pieces, big creators to work with, I think is where he'd really thrive in the NBA.
Right. I'm not going to repeat, everything you guys said. I just will say that I love his speed, and when you see a guy with that type of speed, they kind of stand out. Ja Morant may be the prime example of just, when he was at Murray State, how it stood out. Now, fortunately, we see Shepherd against better competition, but at the same time, we don't really see Shepherd really given the keys to the offense like Morant had at Murray. So, what would be ideal is to see not Shepherd. Dillingham. If I said Shepherd, I meant Dillingham. What would be nice is to see Dillingham in a different situation where, remember, he had a little more control of the offense. But I am to make long story short, I am definitely buying as a lottery selection, but not lower half of the lottery. All right, next guy up, Harrison Ingram. And Harrison, really earned a lot of got a lot of celebratory type of stuff for his performance against Duke, where he put up 21 points on 8 of 12 shooting, including 5 of 9 from deep. Also pulled down 13 rebounds, had 4 steals, and a block on top of it. But I think more so why Harrison Ingram's on this list, we've mentioned him a lot when we've talked about North Carolina, about how he seems to be the missing piece for this team, or was the missing piece. And on the season, he's pretty much setting career highs in just about every department. For example, he's scoring 12.6 points per game, shooting 43 from the floor, 41 from deep. Now he is stinking it up from the free throw line, and this is his career worst, 57%. For his career, he's at 62%. Still not good. He's bringing down 9 boards a game, 2.4 assists, and that's where he's been probably unheralded as a passer on this team. Also been contributing big time in terms of big defensive plays, 1.5 steals and a half a block per game. So he's definitely, to me, been kind of a do-everything guy for North Carolina, team first guy. And most people have him rated as a late second round pick. So Drew, are you buying or selling Ingram? Ingram as a late round, second round pick?
Yeah, I think this is, for me, a pretty easy buy if that's the value I can get him at, because, it's so people who listen to the show, I worked at Stanford. I was actually around Harrison, not like personally anything, but I was kind of just being around him. Super good dude. You get into Stanford, you got a pretty squared away head on your shoulders for the most part. So off the court, he was super cool. But, I think that these are the types of guys that it's like you take flyers on, because where I kind of made the comment that, Rob Dillingham's a little bit more leans towards the one trick pony side. I don't want to say he is, but like you look at a guy like this and go, he's the exact opposite. Like, he's never going to be a guy who's going to be a scorer, but you're like, he's a solid shooter that can kind of stretch the floor. He is a good rebounder, and he was a good rebounder at Stanford, but that team just wasn't great. I think here you're kind of seeing him kind of fully unleashed. He's always been, again, a really solid IQ guy. If you watch him like guard off the ball, you watch him pass, like kind of do the less glamorous things. He's always been really solid at those things. So at the second round, you're getting a guy that if you can turn into like your seventh or eighth, kind of just a rotational forward who kind of has the size, maybe guard up a little bit, but can also stretch the floor. A guy who can, be, again, when I say secondary playmaker, a guy who can take a pass and make the right read. I just think there's enough strengths to his game where something will kind of stick at that value. I mean, you're seeing it. I mean, we're talking about in his last, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, his worst rebounding night was 13. Like, stuff like that carries over. Like, if you're a rebounder, that will.
He's been super steady for them. Super steady.
Like, you look at, like, against big games, showed up against Duke. I saw him against UConn. I watched that game like fully. Was really solid against UConn, and like he's had some stinkers in there. But when you're on a team with an RJ Davis who's leading the offense, and the point I made when he went there, why he was the perfect fit was, and why I like this team, and I had them as a Final Four team when we talked, was they have a guy that can do like fit every role, and I think Harrison Ingram is the guy who's the chameleon. He's the guy who's like, hey, we need to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. I can knock down a three. Hey, we need extra help on the boards. I can grab some boards. We need another guy that can kind of help facilitate offense. He can do that. So I think it's an easy buy. I just look at the resume. And even at Stanford, we were critical. I know on the show back in the past we had him.
Yeah.
But
part of it, I think, was how he was used.
Exactly. If you look past that, you would still see, like, there were flashes. I remember my first introduction to him was when he had 21 and 11 against the current, at that time, number 7 ranked and undefeated USC team with Isaiah Mobley. And I was like, wow, this kid's just really solid. Like, banged a 3, grabbed 11 boards, didn't really turn the ball over, like, right rotations. He's not a great athlete, but he is super strong. He's thick. So,
yeah,
I mean, he's a bit of a tweener, but I think that he can shoot the ball well enough and pass well enough that it won't be a huge issue. Unlike a Draymond Green, where you have the question of, man, I don't know, he can't really do anything offensively. You don't really know here. I think there's enough offensive versatility where being a tweener isn't a death knell for him.
And here's the thing, in that Carolina game, Duke was focused on stopping RJ Davis. They put Mark Mitchell on him, and then they put Proctor on him. Both players are significantly bigger than Davis. And for the most part, until the very end of the game, they did shut him down. And so who carried that team? It was Baycott, getting some putbacks and a couple of hook shots, and Ingram from deep, And then, of course, the boards, Baycott and Ingram were just pounding the boards. But they won basically without RJ Davis being very much a factor for probably 35 minutes of that game. Caleb?
Call me crazy. I just came to this idea. I feel like his NBA comp is Grant Williams.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
I think obviously there's some stylistic differences and some skill differences. I think Grant Williams is probably a better defender. He's
a better athlete. He's a better athlete, I think.
Yeah, but
Ingram's offensive game is much more polished at this point,
Yes.
It's more skilled, and I think he's a much better passer than Grant Williams is. But I think he can probably guard 2-3 positions in the NBA. Kind of be a Swiss Army knife kind of guy offensively. I would love to take him I'd probably take him in like the 40s range. Maybe not like end of the second round, probably like first half of the second round, especially if I'm a team that's like looking for a guy to come in and play real minutes right away. I think if something holds him back, it's probably, and this like sucks to say, it's probably going to be his athleticism, like side to side, his ability to just like stay in front of guys to help recover, get out on closeouts, to beat closeouts offensively. Like, I think it's going to be that kind of stuff that really holds him back. But like those kinds of guys, if I'm an NBA team, would be these like really smart, high IQ guys that can kind of do a little bit of everything. Those would be the guys that I would want to bet on.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to move on to FAU's Johnell Davis. And he has just been fantastic. I can't remember the last time he scored less than 14 points, but just to give you a quick sample, just over the last 4 games, all of which were wins, he scored 24, 28, 14, and 34. And as I said, if I look for the last time he scored less than 14, I have to go all the way back to the Liberty game in November. So it's been a long time.
He's got 2 single-digit games all year. It's
Right.
that Liberty game where he shot 0 of 7 from the field, and then what was the other one? Eastern Michigan, where he only played 19 minutes.
Well, they were probably winning by about 100.
He had 4 fouls.
Oh,
so I think
and they did win by they won by 43 or something like that. I think
Eastern Michigan's bad. So, all right. So on the season, he's averaging 19 points per game, and he's shooting 51 from the floor, 50 from deep on over 4 attempts per game, 86 from the free throw line. Just like all FAU guards, he's a good rebounder. He's bringing in 6.9 boards per game, 2.6 assists, 1.7 steals. If there's a knock, it's the 2.5 assists. So his assist turnover ratio is not good. And of course, FAU, unlike, somebody's playing like in the Big 12, they don't have the toughest schedule in the world. But I think Davis, if you look at his resume, this is his 4th year at FAU, could play another year if he wants. He's just putting up great numbers, and he's been the clear star of this team. What do you think, Caleb? Oh, and I should put it in perspective. In terms of draft stock, I'm not seeing him on anybody's draft boards. I don't remember, except for ours. And we still have him outside the he's really close to our top 100. I think in our next release, I'm just looking that up right now. Actually, no. In our next release, which isn't posted, he will be in our top 100.
I mean, if he shoots, it feels easy to say, but man, if he's a 50% 3-point shooter, like, he's got decent size to be a combo guard. He's not going to guard down. He's not really going to guard. Like, he's not as versatile defensively, but man, if he's shooting 50%, like, I think he's a solid enough team defender. Somebody should give him a shot. Like, maybe a undrafted contract, like right outside of the gate, right out of the gate. I don't know what I'm saying, but
you mean like a 2-way contract?
Yeah, like a 2-way right after the draft. Because a lot of times, especially that second half of the second round, they'll kind of like negotiate, like, hey, nobody draft Johnell Davis in the last 15 picks because he's going to get a 2-way with a team that he like wants to go to. But I think he could be especially if he's shooting like that, and he's a really skilled offensive player. He's not just a great shooter.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as that. Like, I think
so you're buying him as a potential 2nd round pick.
End of the 2nd round again. Like I said, I don't think he has.
Well, I said potential. So you think he's worthy of being, as we're now going to be putting him in our top 100. You're buying that as a legitimate draft prospect at this point.
Yes. I think he. Oh, we talked. Who's the guy from Memphis that we talked about?
David Jones.
Yeah, I think that's like an interesting comp. Honestly, they both.
David Jones much bigger.
Yes, but just from like a draft perspective, like, I think they do a lot of similar.
And ironically,
things as far as
I have
offensively and scoring.
I have the same problem with David Jones as I had with Davis that I have with David Jones.
Which is what?
They're both they're not vertically elite. They both can struggle to finish around the rim. So, but, like David Jones, he can score in a lot of different ways. He could score in ISO. He could score off the pick and roll. He could shoot off the dribble. Very talented offensive player. And he's been improving each year, just like David Jones. So,
but to me, it's just like, if you're a 45% 3-point shooter,
right,
like,
you don't have to go to the rim.
Right. Than being a 36, like, that 10% is huge. You're saying, like, if Sam Merrill was a 35% 3-point shooter, he wouldn't be playing right now with the Cavs.
You are correct.
Instead, he's the 2nd best 3-point shooter in the NBA. So if he's if he's Sam Merrill as a shooter, he should get drafted, or at least he should be on a roster.
Right. And Sam Merrill's a good example because Sam is athletically challenged, at least in terms of verticality. I mean, he's not going to win any dunk contest. I will say that Sam, even at this stage of the game, was a much better playmaker. You could play Sam as a point guard. I don't know if you want Johnell Davis being your point guard. He's really a scorer. But who knows? Maybe he develops into that. Drew?
This is a super easy buy for me because I think this dude is a dog. Like I think this is a really easy buy because these are the types of guys, and I know I've made these like a Pierce. He's a shooting guard, like you said, Rich. Right now, he is a shooting guard. He's not a combo. He's not a one. He's a shooting guard. He's going to get buckets up, but like he rebounds incredibly well. I think he's not the greatest athlete, but he does defend. I mean, the steal numbers kind of show you a willingness to kind of stick his nose in there and be physical and defend. My biggest issue is the turnovers. Like he's had some bad turnover games where you're talking 5+, where it's like, okay, those are a lot of possessions you're giving up. But again, on a team where they're kind of asking him to be that alpha and like that offensive driving force with the ball in your hands, you're going to turn it over. I mean, he's shooting at least 12 to 14 times a night minimum. And in close games, he's really putting them up or against top opponents. But I just think like the argument if they don't play in the best conference, totally valid. But let's just go look at what he did against Arizona. They win 56% from the floor. And the 3-ball wasn't even dropping for him. He was 1 of 6, but he pulls down 9 boards, 3 steals, 3 assists. He had 5 turnovers, but that game did go to double overtime. Goes for 35. They lose to Illinois, closed game by 9. He has 19 points, another 9 boards, 4 assists, 58% from the floor, 75% from 3. And then A&M early, I know this one's early in the year, but 26 points, 9 of 15 from the floor. Like this dude is a dog. These are the type of guys I would love to bet on. Like he had said, if it was a two-way, I think this is a great guy to snag on a two-way because you know that guys like this in your, well, not program, I guess, but in your franchise, I think they're just pluses because they have skill. They're savvy. They're experienced players that went on a Cinderella-esque run to the final four last year. He's very clearly on people's radars now and still putting up big numbers. The pressure hasn't gotten to him. He's performed against top opponents. I don't need to get into all the numbers. I just think this is an easy buy. If you're telling me that I'm going to get this guy in the 50 to 60 range or on a two-way undrafted, sign me up because at the end of the day, I'm going to get guys who's going to compete. A guy who, like you guys said, if this 3-ball, I mean, 50% is absurd, but if this 3-ball is 40% in the NBA, just 40%, you're like, okay, dude, now you're talking about at 6'4" with his, ability to put the ball in the bucket. And if he can legitimately space the floor, you have something, and then you figure everything else out from there, especially in today's NBA where 3-ball's king. So easy buy for me.
Right.
He feels like a guy that in like 3 years, he shows up as like, he spent the last 2 seasons on the Miami Heat Summer League team. And then in 3 years, he's like coming off the bench as a 27-year-old for the Miami Heat and puts up 15 points twice in a Eastern Conference Finals game. And you're like,
pulling down like 7 boards and comes up with like a game-winning steal. And you're like, what the hell? Where did this dude come from? And then we're going to be sitting here going, we freaking told you guys.
Mark the date.
All right. So the next guy on our list, and finally we get to say something positive about Arkansas, is the one player who's actually really played well for them for most of the season. Had a little injury trouble. He took a hard fall, and I forget, back, but he seems to be okay now. In his last few games, Tramon Mark put up 20, 22, 11, 18, and 35. That was against A&M, a good defensive team on the season. Tramon he's averaging, I didn't even realize this, he's quietly averaging 18 points per game. I didn't realize he was scoring that much. He's 4.1 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.8 blocks, which is pretty nice for a wing. 1.5 or 1.6 turnovers, which means he has a negative assist turnover ratio. He is a little bigger than Jonathan Davis, we just talked about, and also I'd say they're about the same age, 22, and in difference, I said Jonathan, I meant Johnell Davis, and but he's 6'6", and yeah, I think he's a little more athletic too. I think he has capability of. I've seen it. I've seen it. He throws down some pretty nice dunks. He's not vertically challenged. So yeah, I mean, there are some. I actually am impressed. Given the mess that Arkansas has, that he has done so well. Drew?
Yeah, I mean, this is the lone bright spot on this team. I think, like, especially with Brazil being in and out with injuries and everything that was going on with Devo Davis, and I mean, there was a fight or an altercation on the bench between I forget who it was, but it was Musselman and one of the players where like they had to be like separated, they were getting at each other. So for all those problems, this is the lone like kind of one bright spot. I mean, again, he's a scorer. That's what he's doing. He's going to score the basketball. But I'll give him credit on a team that's had so much flow and had arguably their second and third best players kind of in and out of the lineup so consistently, with Davis stepping away for a bit and coming back and not being as great as he was in the last couple of years. Brazil not really being able to stay healthy and still not being as dynamic as we thought. Like, I mean, he's putting up 18 a game, shooting 52% from the floor, 37% from three on 3 attempts a game is pretty good volume. So I'm a little bit like torn here because I'm just like, I feel like guys that kind of fit this profile are kind of a dime a dozen. Like, you're a scorer, you're a fourth year player, you're a good college scorer. You've gotten better as a scorer, but granted your volume has gone up substantially since you left Houston. So I'm like, I don't necessarily think it's a sell, but I'm kind of just going to hold here because there's nothing he does to me outside of scoring the basketball I think is like, oh, that's really, really good. Like, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, but he doesn't play make a lot. He's an okay rebounder, but at 6'6" and he is a good athlete. You're like 4 boards isn't great. Like, that's not like an eye popper. Like, you're an efficient scorer. There's always a need for that in the NBA. There's always a need for that at the next level. I mean, but I do think there's an element of like 6'6" wings who can kind of 3-level score and fill it up, or I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but like you can find guys like that.
You already did.
Yeah. So to me, he's a hold. Like, he's done nothing bad. I don't want to say he's hurt. He's done nothing to hurt his stock. He's been a bright spot on a really struggling, arguably the most disappointing team in the country. Like, I might give my Zach.
And he's having a career. He's having a career year.
And he's having a career year from three, from the floor. If you were to calculate the volume, he's actually been really good from the free throw line. But like, nothing here really makes me go, dude, that is something that I could bang on. Like, how many guys can we look at that are 6'5" to 6'7" that play out on the wing, good athlete, not amazing, but good athlete that are going to score 15 to 20 a game in college ball? So it's a hold.
Okay, Caleb.
I'm gonna sell. Again, like, I do want to reiterate that he has done absolutely nothing wrong. He has been the best player and the most consistent player in Arkansas all year. Side note, if you guys want some fun, go to like the Arkansas message boards and read about what they think is going on inside the program. It is a trip. But to me, like Drew was saying, 6'6" guys who can get buckets, like, that's basically every player in the NBA, literally. Like, you said he's having a career year from 3, and he is. Like, he's shooting great. He's shooting 37%, but he's only shooting a little over 2.5 threes a game. If he was shooting 5 threes a game at 37%, I'd be a lot more impressed and much more inclined to buy him as like an actual shooter. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to be able to space the floor in the NBA. I think he's much more of like a drive and kick guy, who's going to be able to attack off second sides, and he's not a great playmaker, and so he doesn't have that going for him. I think he's an average defender, especially as a man defender. So I really have been super impressed with what he's done this year, and he's taken a serious step up as a scorer from Houston. Like, I've been super impressed. I just don't think in the NBA context he really brings enough to the table. And despite him being 2.5 inches bigger than Johnell Davis weighs about 10 to 15 pounds more. And so that even like limits his ability offensively and defensively with that core strength and leg strength. So love what I've seen this year as him. If I was an NBA GM, not somebody that I would draft, would be fun on a summer league team though.
I think Johnell Davis over him. I would take Johnell Davis over him.
Yeah, and that shows up in the rebounds too. I mean, Davis is averaging about 3 more rebounds per game. But the one thing where Mac has Davis is the verticality that comes with being light. You know, when you're a light player, it's usually easier to be more vertical. And so he does have his numbers are much better at the rim. But he's not as good a shooter as Johnell Davis. They're both dynamic scorers. They both could, score off the dribble, score in isolation, score in the pick and roll. But I agree, he's not as good and overall. And so I would grade him a little lower. And again, he's a 4th-year player who could come back for one more year.
Which I assume he will, especially with NIL. I'm out. I'll let you guys finish it up.
Okay. All right, Caleb.
2 hours is where I'm at. Sorry,
all right,
guys.
I got you. Yeah, we had a lot of chatty stuff. All right.
All good. I'll see you guys later.
All right.
See you.
All right, so we're going to move on to who's cold. We lost Caleb, and which is a shame because I wanted to get his opinion on the first guy I'm going to bring up, and that is the, I believe, 5-star. I think he was a top 20 recruit, and Caleb Foster of Duke, who has slowly lost playing time. He's coming off the bench of late. When Duke had some injuries at the beginning of the season, I think he started a lot of games. He was playing some big minutes early in the season, but he didn't start. And then I guess he started to play regularly in the beginning of December, and that lasted all the way up to the Duke game, where he only played 19 minutes, 4 points. But, if you look at his overall numbers, he hasn't really been a regular contributor since they played Queen's University on right before New Year's. He scored 4, 8, 5, 0, 16 against Pittsburgh, then 3, 8, 3, 2. Again, his overall numbers are pretty good. When we look in terms of like shooting splits, 44 from the field, 41 from deep, 61 from the free throw line. Turnovers aren't bad. He's got a 2-to-1 assist turnover ratio, but for whatever reason, John Shire just figures he doesn't fit into the mix. Now, Duke does have a lot of shooters already. I don't know. Are you surprised Foster isn't playing more given these good numbers? I mean, they are pretty darn good.
I mean, this might be a situation maybe Shire's just kind of leaning towards more of the veteran guys. I mean, he's got Flip back, Proctor's back, Roach is there. So, like, he might just be kind of featuring guys that are, a little bit more proven. But, I know we're going to do a buy and hold here. And I think that Caleb Foster, I'm going to say, comes back. These numbers aren't enough to justify, in my opinion. You never know in today's climate. You could transfer, you could enter the draft anyways, whatever the case may be. But, I mean, I think this is a pretty solid buy because like the underlying metrics of the numbers, like, 7, 2, and 2, or rounded up 8, 2, and 2 isn't like, oh my God, amazing. But like for a freshman to play at Duke, the schedule that they play, and while he's kind of fallen out of the rotation. I mean, he's still the lowest minutes he's played is still 13 in the loss to Arizona. But I mean, he's still playing in that mid-20s per game. Like he's getting burned in some of these games. So I haven't really seen. To be honest, you kind of forget he's on the team, especially recently. Like he's not somebody against.
Well, that's because he's been regularly outshined by Jaron McCants, especially recently. McCants, we could have had on who's hot. I mean,
for sure.
McCants has probably been. I don't know. It seems like every time I watch them play and Duke plays when they play well, it's McCants.
He's the big X. I think he's one of the guys I feel like with McCants where it's like when you do when Duke wins, McCants plays well. When Duke loses, he's kind of less of a factor. I think he's kind of in that category. But I don't have any real issue with Caleb Foster. He's just been kind of I feel like he's just kind of been a freshman. Like he's not really turning the ball over, but he's on a team with some returning firepower on the biggest brand in college basketball, arguably college sports. And so it's like, all right, well, 7, 2, and 2. I could see him coming back next year and be at 12, 4, and 4.
Yeah.
And now you're having a different
this is kind of like a Justin Edwards situation. You could definitely argue that Caleb Foster's numbers have definitely been better than Edwards.
Oh, for sure.
At least offensively. offense.
And I was willing to buy on Edwards just because, again, I was like, okay, from a pure upside, talent, age standpoint, I think it's a buy. And I think Foster's in that same category. He's been better. Like Foster has been better. He has played
at least as an offensive player.
Yeah, like he's shown me enough that I'm like, okay, he didn't pop right away, but not every 5-star guy does, and in a year, maybe 2, depending on how his growth and development goes in his journey, I'm like, I could totally see him being a double-digit scorer, pulling down 4 or 5 boards, handing out a solid 3 assists, shooting pretty efficiently, and being a really solid piece. Is he gonna evolve into the guy at Duke? You never know. Maybe that's not the way that they recruit, probably not, because they're always bringing big guns in. But
right.
I totally think he could have a route where he ends up being a 3-year player and turns himself into a really nice kind of do-it-all solid piece to a team that is going to contend for a top 5, top 10 spot in the country. So it's an easy buy because you look at his box scores, you look at the games that I've seen him in, and I'm like, I don't think he's been bad. He's just been kind of a non-factor.
Right.
But what do you expect from a freshman on a team that came in with the aspirations of being a national contender?
Yeah. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to draw the conclusion if you're not getting big minutes on your college team that you're not ready for the NBA. That's just
for sure.
Just a general rule of thumb. And so am I buying him as a draft prospect this year like many draft sites were or maybe still are? No, I'm selling in that sense. Future? Yeah, maybe he turns into what he is, but he's not right now. He's doing okay. And not, if he came out in the draft, maybe maybe he gets taken in the second round, depending on who else is in that draft. But I would say he's a long ways away, So yeah, I'm selling in terms of being a draft prospect right now, here and today. All right, so we will move on to Otega Owa, who was really hot, and when Oklahoma was surging through their regular season or their preseason non-conference schedule, but now that he's turned into conference, not so much, and he's really been a part of the reason why Oklahoma has fallen off. It's not all his fault, but let's look at some of these losses. So Oklahoma has dropped, let's see, 5 of their last 8 in those games. Yeah. And I'm going to start back with TCU. 6 points on 2 of 8 shooting against Kansas. 12 points on 5 of 15 shooting. West Virginia was a win, but still 5 of 16 shooting. Cincinnati was a win on 4 of 9, 14 points. So that was a good game. Texas, 10 points, 3 of 7. Texas Tech, 14 points on 6 and 12. Again, that's a good game. And then Kansas State last week, 4 points, 2 of 12. And then in the latest loss, 2 of 4 against UCF for 6 points. So my take is, with Otega, he's a really good driver. He's a strong guard. I consider him a good defender, and he's got the physical body to play in the NBA, and he has a really nice burst of speed. But in terms of the shooter, he can be a total non-factor, or maybe in some cases a negative factor, because he just can't put, he can go so cold. Now, he is hitting a career high 47% from deep, but a lot of those threes were made early in the season, and his on average, he only takes 1.6 threes a game. So his overall numbers still look very good. But what we're seeing here in conference play, now that the schedule's gotten significantly better, he's sliding offensively. Defensively, though, he's averaging 1.8 steals per game and a half a block per game. And like I said, this guy's an athlete and a physical specimen at 6'5", 210. If he gets a consistent jump shot, I'm buying. But right now, I don't. He's only a sophomore, by the way. So right now, and he also went to Blair Academy here right next to me, which is a famous prep school. So he's only sophomore. So I'm not buying today, but I wouldn't sell either because I expect him to come back and I expect him to get better. Any thoughts on Ortega?
I haven't seen a lot of Oklahoma this year. I know like we were a little bit more critical of them as being one of those teams that was in that like, yeah, you're ranked, but have you really played anybody kind of boat? And I think they're kind of coming back down to earth. But I haven't personally seen Ortega enough to really give a buy or sell. So I'll just say ditto, Rich.
All right. Well, good enough. Like I said, not, very much like Caleb Foster, very different type of players, but yeah, not ready for the draft, but don't sell all your stock because I think they will be back in our top 100. All right, next up is Aiden Holloway, the freshman combo guard for Auburn, and Auburn kind of like Ortega Owe, excuse me. He started off the season pretty damn hot. He's a little dynamic point guard, much kind of like Sharif Cooper, but not the passer Sharif Cooper was, but then at the same time, probably a better shooter than Sharif Cooper. And, Auburn had a pretty soft schedule, and he started off pretty darn hot. And then now that the schedule's tougher, he's kind of become a non-factor. If you look, he has scored less than 10 points in 5 straight games. In the game against Ole Miss, where Auburn could have used offense, at least in the first half, he only played 15 minutes, 6 points on 2 of 5 shooting. So that's just an example. Game before, 1 point on 0 for 5, and that was against Vandy, who's not very good. So on the year, his numbers are pretty bad. 32% from the floor, 32% from 3, 76 from the free throw line. His assist numbers are nice, especially his assist turnover ratio is 3.1 to 1. That's over a 3.0 turnover assist ratio. But given his size, given the fact that he's just not putting the ball in the bucket, he had fallen off he started the year in our top 100, toward the back of it. Then he fell to, like the 120s, and now he's coming off the board, in my opinion. So another guy I'm not completely down on, but definitely he's going to be playing, I think, in college ball for another 2-3 years.
Yeah, I've only seen Auburn play once this year. Or no, I take that back. I saw it twice. I saw them when they lost to Alabama. I did see when they lost to Alabama in that close game, and I saw them when they played USC like back well before the new year.
Right.
He was actually pretty good against USC. Granted, everybody's been pretty good against USC. But I'm just looking at more or less his conference resume, or like kind of right before conference into conference, and it is bad. And at 6'1", if you're going to be an undersized guard, or I don't want to say under, if you're going to be a small guard, which is probably realistically in the NBA like 6'2", 6'1", and under, like where you're like a small guard and they have him listed at 6'1", you have to be an elite explosive athlete, a la a Ja Morant and Allen Iverson, guards that are just so athletically dominant that they make up all the inches on their vertical and their quickness. You have to be an elite shooter, which these numbers are very far from elite, or you have to be like an elite playmaker / kind of defender who kind of is more just like point of attack defender and then gets everyone else involved. And the turnover ratio is nice, but it's not like he's dishing out a bunch of assists. Like he'll have 0 assists. He has 0 turnovers, but he has like 3 assists. So it's not like he's throwing 9 assists with 1 turnover. So I haven't seen enough to be able to talk about the game, but I know you don't want to be looking at a box score doesn't tell the whole story, but I think this one kind of does. This is a pretty easy sell, at least for now. You have to come back and play again. There's no way an NBA guy looks at this resume and thinks at 6'1" you belong in the league right now.
Right. I recently looked at all active NBA players, and I sorted them by height. Roughly 1 in 5 players in the NBA, it's like 18%, is 6'3" or under. However, there's only 2 that are under 6 feet out of, I forget how many.
It's a couple hundred.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's multiply 17 by 30. So what do you get there?
You said 17 by 30.
510. Is that 510?
510.
Yeah. So out of 500 players, because not everybody carries a full. Actually, you can carry 18 now, but out of 500 and some players, only 2 are under 6 feet. Now he's listed as 6'1". Probably means he's 6 foot without shoes. The NBA's measurements on NBA.com are without shoes. And usually the measurements you see on college websites are with shoes. So basically, he's got the height factor working against him. So I just expect him to be another little guard that hangs out at Auburn for a few years. And we'll see. We'll see where his game goes. But right now, I'm selling.
Yep.
I don't think, by the way, collectively, people weren't super high on his draft stock. So I probably should say holding because no one's really buying at this point. All right. Last guy we're going to talk about, and I think we talked about Memphis earlier in the show, and I think where some of the problems are coming in from Memphis is due to their point guard play of Javon Quinterly. Now, keep in mind that they went through this losing streak about the same time they lost their starting shooting guard, Caleb Mills. And they really don't have an adequate replacement for him. They're more like using like David Jones as a shooting guard. And I think that lends itself. Do you want a 6'6", 6'7", stocky, strong guy guarding the opposing team scoring guard? Probably not. And where Caleb Mills was a more athletic, long guy, an okay college player, but he gave you the length and the athleticism to have an effective defender at the 2 spot. I don't really think they have that. I mean, David Jones can score, but I don't think he's an ideal guy to put on guards, especially smaller guards. But Quinterly, first of all, Memphis won their first game this weekend after 4 straight losses, and they were to not so great teams. Southern Florida, who's looking better than we thought, Tulane, who's a good team, UAB, who's playing better than we thought, and Rice, who's not playing as well as we thought. I actually thought Rice might be competitive in this conference preseason, and they've been terrible, and they beat Memphis. So, but let's look at Quinterly. Some of his numbers through that 5-game stretch: 1 of 13 against Wichita State for 3 points, 3 of 11 against Rice, 4 of 15 against UAB, 3 of 6 against Tulane, and then 6 of 13 against Southern Florida. So most of those games, he was below 40% or 50% and well. And then in 3 of the last 4 games, he's had at least 3 turnovers, including 6 against Southern Florida. So Quinterly, another small guy, another 6'1" guy. You're probably not going to find a better ball handler in Division I basketball. He's also, in his last year, this is it. He really used to be on draft boards, but he hasn't been on draft boards in a couple of years. And we didn't have him in our top 200, but we had him, maybe 300 or so. But I see him even slipping further. I mean, the guy's 34% career 3-point shooter. His assist turnover ratio for career is so. I'm trying to get to that number. It's 1.6. So he's really always been a scoring point guard who's not very effective at shooting. Quinterly can be explosive. He can make some great shots, amazing shots off the dribble. And like I said, his handle is elite, but everything else about his game is not attractive. So if there was any draft stock to sell, I'm selling. And I really think the combination of losing Caleb Mills and throw in Quinterly's struggles, and now you have a good starting to show why, Memphis's guard play is just not there right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a pretty straightforward sell. Like this is what, year 5, third school.
Well,
So
year
it's the
6 if you count the transfer year.
Yeah. So okay. So year 6 of being a college athlete, year 5 of playing,
And
right? If I'm
he's
not mistaken.
25 years old.
Yeah.
So
It's
he
like,
started late. He was one of those 20-year-old freshmen.
yeah,
Now
like,
he's in his 6th year.
and like, getting out of the SEC, you would think that like, okay, it's overall a bit stepped down in competition, like night
Definitely.
in and night out. Like you would expect, and like you look up his numbers from his 3 years at Alabama to this year, you're like, he's literally the same player. And I think he's gotten to the point, like, I think the big argument with guys and then you always see guys like, 22-year-olds where they're like, oh, I don't know how much more development. He's 21 already. This is 30 years in college or 4 years. He's 21, 22. And I think for him, that's a legitimate argument, though. Like, he's 25. He's
Yeah.
been at 3 different programs. And, like, I think we've just seen him stagnate. Like, this is who he is as a basketball player. And that's fine. I mean, he's a solid Division One, was Power 5/high mid-major type of guard. But I think, you know, I'm always pushed back against that narrative against like juniors and seniors coming out because, I think that like if you're 21, 22 years old, you have more to give. But at 25, 6 years in college, and you took a step down in the competition, you're playing night in and night out, particularly when it comes to conference play, and you're still kind of the same player. Like, I would have expected him to go there and be like, I don't want to say dominant, but be like kind of a force and be like, okay, this is a 5th year/6 year point guard who was in Alabama, started a bunch of games for Alabama, and instead it's like you're the same player. Like you haven't elevated your game, you haven't got any
Well, the
better.
one year where he started consistently for Alabama, he averaged
Yeah,
12.2 points per game. This year, he's down to 10.1. Now, I will
yeah,
say he's doing his best in terms of assists and turnovers.
for sure.
He's almost at 5 turnovers, and if you round down, he's at 2. So that's a nice assist to turnover ratio, something he never had at Alabama.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, like you said, going down to a lesser conference, you would expect not only his assist numbers to improve now that he has full reins of the team, but you would also want his shooting numbers to be there.
Absolutely.
And right now he's shooting his team out of games. I mean, 1 of 13 against Wichita. How did they win that game? Because it certainly wasn't him.
Yeah,
That's just bad. And Wichita
no,
is
for
not.
sure.
And Wichita's a bad team. So yeah. Like I said, I know we're stretching it because he's not really on anybody's draft radar anymore, but I think I more put him on here just to talk about Memphis's struggles and where they're coming from.
For sure.
All right, so now we'll move on to picks of the week, and here we go. Last week, we never had this happen ever. All three of us,
Wow.
and we had very different picks, all three of us. And we all ended up 15 and 11. The
Wow.
percentages are so close. I'm rounding up. I'm at 57%. You're at 56. Cam, 58. Doesn't qualify.
Damn, I love you, but you do not count.
And Caleb is 56. In fact, the difference between you and Caleb is 1 win on the season. He's 68 and 53. You're 67 and 53. So no one's lighting it up. We all kind of stink. Yeah. So last year you could kind of use some guys' picks as anti-barometers, and you can use my picks as a barometer. But man, this year
it's the nature of the beast this year. Like seriously, outside of, and I'm not a Purdue guy because I'm not really a Zach Edey guy. I don't know if you can win the highest level with him. Like I don't know. Outside of UConn and Purdue right now, though, is there any team in the country that you think is, I don't want to say unbeatable, but like a buzzsaw, like rolling? Like not really. Every team's kind of got 1 or 2 losses where you're like, ooh, I don't know, probably shouldn't have lost that one. Everybody's beating everybody. So
yep.
I'll take it. I'm over 50%. I'll take it.
All right, here we go. All right, we got tonight's games are Ole Miss at South Carolina. By the way, I watched that South Carolina when they beat Tennessee. They are the type of team that just put you to sleep. They really are not talented offensively. They got a couple of guards that can score, but they really, they play tough defense. And before you know it, you're like, okay, we can beat this team. They really can't score very much. The score, toward the end of the game is like 52-54. And you think eventually, oh, we're gonna win this. And then, the final score is like 58-57, and you lost another one to South Carolina. So they put you to sleep, man. They do. They do.
They do. No, they do. They definitely do.
Sorry. So we got Ole Miss at South Carolina. Who you got?
I'm gonna take South Carolina. I feel like they're at home. I think this Ole Miss team has constantly been kind of on that precipice of like, I just need to see a little bit more. Like, I need a big win from you. Like they've been kind of right on that cusp of a team that I think is pretty good. But I think South Carolina, like they're not the sexiest team to watch, but they are winning. They have only 3 losses on the year. So at home, I'll take South Carolina.
Yeah, I think Mississippi only has 4. This is really offense versus defense. Oh boy. I'm gonna go with Mississippi. I just don't believe in South Carolina. All right, now we got number 14, Iowa State at Texas. Woo!
This is a good game. I'm gonna go with Iowa State. Rich, you kind of converted me. I remember a couple of weeks ago you talked about how you like this Iowa State team and that you felt that they were a team that might be like a year away from really being like really dangerous. So I paid a little bit more attention. Like I said, I watched that full Iowa State Baylor game. I'm gonna go Iowa. I think that team is on the rise.
All right. I like Iowa State a lot. I like Texas a lot. Texas is home. I'm going with Texas. All right. Now we got BYU and Oklahoma. I don't think I've picked an Oklahoma game right all year. So, folks, whatever I pick here, go the opposite.
Oh, man. I don't really like this BYU team, to be honest.
I do like them. The problem I have with them is it's just they shoot so many threes.
I think they're so reliant on the 3 ball. Like I watched them get handled by Cincinnati because they refuse to do anything but just sit outside and shoot.
Well, this weekend, Fus Triori, who we had on the show, he's now seems to be fully healthy, and he was their leading scorer. He's like put down 24 and 10. So I think they're starting to mix it up a little.
I'm not really a fan of either of these teams, to be honest, but I'll take Oklahoma.
Okay. I am going to go with BYU, which means you're probably right. And just because of what I said, Oklahoma, first of all, we talked about them before. They're going in the wrong direction. BYU is now starting to incorporate some inside scoring, and they're going to need that if they're going to succeed in the long run. All right, now we got a top 25 matchup, Texas Tech at Baylor. Texas Tech, after being in first place, dropped 2 straight.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go Baylor. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I thought Baylor at the time they were outside the top 10. They still are. That they were a top 10, an outside the top 10 team that I think could make a run at Final Four appearance. I still think this Baylor team is really solid at home. Give me Baylor.
Yeah, like Oklahoma, like South Carolina, I'm not quite sure how Texas Tech is doing it. I just don't see the talent. And next game's got another team like that, Colorado State, who I've not done very well picking. I usually go against Colorado State, but anyway, I digress. I'm going Baylor. And so next up, we got Boise State at Colorado State. I don't think I picked a Colorado State game right this year.
I think Colorado State's come back to earth. Like I think they had that stretch where
they did really last week. Didn't you go with CS? No, I guess Caleb went with CSU. You and I went with San Diego State. When San Diego State went to Colorado State, we both went with San Diego State, or maybe you went with CSU. But anyway, CSU won that game. It was close, but yet CSU pretty much led from start to finish.
Yeah, I'll take Colorado State because they're home. I think they are a good team. I don't want to say they've come back to earth like they suck and they were lucky to be without. They have talent on that roster. Particularly, I forget what the guard's name is.
Isaiah Stevens.
Yes. I think Isaiah Stevens is a really solid player, one of the better players in the Mountain West. So I'll go with the home team.
All right. I too am going to go with the home team. I think both of these teams have about three players that are really, really good. And that's why I'm not huge fans, because I don't see the overall depth. So I put these teams on a similar level. I'm going with CSU. All right, now we have the suddenly resurgent Michigan State at Minnesota, who pulled off a big upset this week. I forget who, but they beat somebody, Northwestern. They beat Northwestern, and I think they were home, though. I think they were home.
Yeah,
So Minnesota is right in the middle of this Big Ten race.
Fun fact, Minnesota, there's a kid on that roster who I went to high school with who played football somewhere. Now he's Jack Wilson,
Don't know Jack.
7-footer. He's only played like in a handful of games this year.
Okay.
But with that being said, Michigan State's burned me. I think I picked every one of their games wrong this year. Maybe one I got right, but I think they're just more talented than Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they are more talented than Minnesota. Minnesota's in the middle, but I think that's more of a, it's a conference that kind of, again, cannibalizes itself, where all these teams are kind of close and they're beating up on each other. So I'll take Sparty just because I think they're better.
All right. I am going to go with Minnesota. And by the way, this is Minnesota's first appearance on our picks of the week this year. And I'll tell you why. I think Michigan State, even though they've been playing well and finally seem to have it going together, winning on the road in the Big Ten has been really hard. And Michigan State's got Illinois coming up. So I think they're going to be caught with their pants down. And I'm going to go with Minnesota. And if I could spell it. All right. So next up is tomorrow's games. We have Alabama at Auburn. Alabama pretty much handled Auburn at home, but now they got to go to that crazy place in Auburn. I think it's Neville Arena.
I know we were hard on him. I'll take Bama. I think Bama they're just a little bit better, in my opinion. I think these teams are relatively close, but I'll take Bama.
Yeah, I think they're close. I think the home court. I think Auburn's going to really want revenge. I'm going to go with Auburn. All right, we have Villanova, another team I haven't done very well picking this year, at Xavier. This is another game. These are bubble teams, if you ask me. Fighting for the middle of the pack in the Big East.
I'm going to take Nova again. I feel like I'm going to get burned here. Neptune's going to do something crazy, like start the ball boy and run the offense through him, and then they're going to lose. But I'm going to take Nova. But I don't feel really great about this one. I just still think that this Nova team I don't think they are talented. But I just think that they don't operate at their full. They're not optimized to operate at their full capacity. But I think they have enough talent to go beat Xavier at Xavier.
Do you realize Villanova players have been like almost a steady feature on our Who's Cold, because they are like, at least, I mean, none of them are like top level draft prospects, but they're still in that range where they could be like a second round pick. But we almost had another one on there this week, but they got hot. I was going to put TJ Bamba on there, but he played well. And
we've got Burton, Keem Hart.
We've had Burton and we had Hart. Hart has played better somewhat. Well, actually, he wasn't getting played much. All right, so we have another newcomer to the picks of the week, and that's Nebraska, and they are at Northwestern. Nebraska just came off last week, beat Wisconsin at home.
I'm gonna go with Northwestern at home, man. They've been pretty they've been scrapping. Obviously, their signature moment so far this year was beating Purdue, but they did beat Michigan State, if I remember correctly. They beat Illinois, I think, in an overtime game. They took Purdue to overtime again. So I'll take Northwestern at home. To be completely transparent, I haven't seen a lot of them, but
I will say Nebraska has better balance offensively. They can score inside now, and if Tominaga goes crazy, watch out. And he has been known to do that for Nebraska. But Northwestern's got 3 or 4 guys that can really shoot the three, and when they're on, they'll give anybody a game. I'm going to go with Northwestern at home. All right, now we have for first place in, oh, God forbid, what conference is this? Sanford?
Oh, the Southern.
Okay.
right?
So now,
I think they're the Southern Conference.
Now we have the battle for the Southern Conference between Samford, who, man, these guys can put up points. I'm talking about a couple of games this year. I think they've scored well over 100. And they are at UNC Greensboro. This is for first place in the Southern Conference.
I'll take Samford. I think Samford's the best offense. I think they're the best offense here. So I'll take Samford. Again, not overly familiar, but
Yeah. I think Samford's the overall better team, but I think being at home gives Greensboro a slight edge. But I think this game is a toss-up. I'm going to go with Greensboro. All right. So now we have number 8, Arizona at Utah. Utah's been playing without their starting point guard, Rolly Worcester. And Davion Smith, the transfer point guard from Georgia Tech, didn't play early in the season because he was a 2-time transfer. Well, man, this kid has come on. I mean, he's like a triple-double threat of late. And he's really played well. So Utah really hasn't lost a beat without their starting point guard. So what do you got? Number 8, Arizona at Utah.
I'm going to take Arizona. Arizona's the more talented team. They've been up and down, but they're the more talented team. I'll take Zona.
I think I have to agree, but I think it's going to be close. Going to be game worth watching. Check out Davion Smith. All right, now we have battle for first. Well, actually, not the battle. It should be the battle first place in the Big West. UC Irvine has got a solid lead in the Big West. UC Santa Barbara, who everybody picked to win the conference, is really like in 4th place. Can Santa Barbara turn it around? They need this game. This is like
And you know what? I'm going to take Irvine. Irvine, like the Big West is kind of again in my backyard, so I catch games like on ESPN Plus. So Irvine defends, and I think at a conference at this level, like I think being able to defend is such an advantage because there's just there's still Division I college basketball players, but if you can defend, you can really stymie teams. And a Santa Barbara team that's already kind of struggled this year, Irvine can go in there, I think, and lock up. And I think defense is even more important at this level because teams are just a little less explosive offensively. They're a little bit more system reliant. Like they don't have as many bucket go-getters, elite NBA guys out there. So I'll take Irvine. But I think this is a good game because I think Santa Barbara senses the moment. Like if you lose this game, I don't want to say your season's over, but your season might be over.
Well, I mean, right now, in order to get in, they would have to win. They'd have to win their tournament, and they'd be like the 4th seed. So Santa Barbara's got 2 pro prospects, and they played a fairly decent outside of conference schedule and didn't do so great. So this conference is only getting 1 team in. I think they got to turn their season around to improve their seeding. This is must win. I'm going with Santa Barbara at home. All right. We have another potential battle for first place. Dayton, lost to Richmond, but then Richmond lost to VCU. Yeah. So VCU is right on Dayton's butt. So is Richmond. So we have Dayton at Virginia Commonwealth.
I'm going to complete the circle of parity. I'm going to take Dayton here.
Man, this is tough. I know Dayton kind of laid an egg at Richmond. I'm going to go with Dayton. I'm going to think maybe they learned something from that loss at Richmond. If not, they're going to have like a 3-way tie for first place in the A-10. All right, so now we have San Diego State, who's starting to turn it around and has moved back in the top 25 at Nevada.
I'll take San Diego State here. I think they're starting to finally kind of hit their stride, right the ship. Not that the ship was ever like city, but like really started to hit their stride. I think the expectations of this team looking like the same team that made the finals last year was overblown. I mean, you lose Keyshawn Johnson, you lose Matt Bradley. Like they lost more than they brought in probably relative to like what they did last year. So I think that they're starting to kind of figure it out though. And I think they're very much so
one thing they don't have that they've had for years is a shot blocker. You know, they don't really have
Yes.
a rim protector.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Nevada. This is Nevada. You know, we thought they would be in the fight for this conference, and really right now they're looking like the 5th or 6th best team in this conference. But I still don't think they have the talent to compete with the upper level teams. But this is kind of a must win for them because right now they're not in the tournament discussion. So they got to win some of these games, and I'm going to go with Nevada at home. Tough place to play in Reno. All right, now we move down to Saturday's games. And I haven't been announcing Caleb's games. Maybe I'll rattle them off at the very end. So now we have the game I referred to earlier. We have number 10 Illinois at Michigan State.
I picked Michigan State earlier to get the win over a team I think they're better than against, was it Minnesota?
Yeah.
I think Illinois is better than Michigan State and playing better. So I'm going to take Illinois.
I do. Even though I said Michigan State would lose looking ahead to this game, I still think Illinois is playing really well. They're really playing well. I got to go with the Illini. All right. So next up on the Saturday slate is TCU, still not ranked, at Iowa State.
I think this is actually a really, really good game. I think TCU, as a lot of those Big 12 teams, are kind of all fighting for that ranking, like the right to be ranked, because they all pick up big wins against each other. But I still think this Iowa State team is really good, and they're at home. So I'll go with the Cyclones.
I too. Ames is a very tough place to play. I got to go with. I also think Iowa State's a little more talented team.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is battle for sole possession in the Ivy League. Cornell at Yale, 2 preseason favorites. By the way, Princeton was looking so good. They dropped 2 last week. And so they've lost to both Yale and Cornell, which puts the conference in these 2 teams' hands right now.
I'll go Yale. I'll be honest, I've only seen Yale play once this year, very early in the year against my Zags. But as is the case with, I think, Yale teams, they're just kind of, they play basketball in a very like solid, rebounding, defensive-minded way, and that's done them really, really well. They've been one of the best, probably consistently the best team in the Ivy the last couple of years, at least going back to when I was in high school, even when they knocked off Baylor and stuff like that. So give me Yale.
Yeah. I think these teams are pretty even. Yale was my preseason pick. It was also Jake's preseason pick to win the Ivy. They really kind of started the season slow, but they seem to be getting it back together now. I'm going with Yale at home. All right, now we have number 12, Auburn at Florida.
Oh, this one's tough. Again, I'm gonna go Auburn. I just think this Florida team is talented, but you just look at how many one possession games that they've lost, how many overtime games that they've even like all of their games just come down to like overtime or one possession, and it's like it's so hard to pick teams like that. Like you pick up a great overtime win against Kentucky after a great overtime win against Georgia, but then you lose to Texas A&M by 1, like in your last 3 games. So I think eventually that kind of starts to catch up to you.
They had 2 open shots to win that game.
Yep. And I picked Alabama to beat Auburn earlier. So I'm going to take Auburn. If they lose Alabama, they'll be locked and loaded, looking to kind of, get a win against somebody. And Florida's coming off 3 straight, very tightly contested games. So I'll take Auburn.
I am going with Florida for kind of the same rationale, but I have them beating Alabama. So I think they're going to come off that high and have a little letdown at Florida. I think Florida is right there with those other teams, just not quite hasn't had enough.
They literally can't finish. If they could, like I said, they're one of those teams in the country where if you added just 5 made shots to their season, like made just 5 made shots, like I made this comment about the Zags earlier, they might be ranked.
Yeah.
Like if you gave them definitely 5 more made shots through the course of all those overtime,
and they certainly have the
losses.
talent, depth, and size to compete with anybody.
But they can't close.
Right. So now we have, this is for first place in the CAA, or what used to be the Colonial Athletic is now the Coastal Athletic. Charleston was the preseason favorite. They're in second place. Drexel is the surprise team, which actually not a surprise. Jake and I talked about them in the preseason and thought they had a legitimate shot at winning the CAA. So yeah, for first place in the CAA. I will also say Drexel either tonight or tomorrow plays at Wilmington, who's the other team in that race. So
Yeah.
Drexel's going to learn a lot about itself this week because they're playing on the road at Wilmington and then at Charleston.
Give me Charleston at home.
Yeah. I kind of have to agree. I picked Charleston to win this conference early in the season. They played a pretty tough out of conference schedule and they took their lumps. So, all right, UNC at Miami, and you might be like, what the heck is this doing on the schedule? I'm just thinking after that national television embarrassment that Miami has a shot here. I mean, this is kind of like it. This is kind of like it. Does Miami turn their season around or not? So who you got, Drew? North Carolina or Miami? At Miami, I should say.
Since I've been involved with the show, I've been a pretty positive supporter of Miami. A lot of the players that have come out of there, Jordan Miller, North Shadow Mir, Poplar, Isaiah Wong, I've really enjoyed watching. I've spoken highly of. But I think this is just really crappy timing for them. I mean, I agree with you that this is kind of the season-defining moment. Like, either you get the season-defining win and hopefully turn it around, or you kind of just keep fading back and back. I just think it's really bad timing. I think UNC is playing inspired basketball. I think they're very clearly one of the top 4 teams in the country as it stands. And I see where you're going with the Miami pick because I think it's do or die, and I think that's going to be the message. Like, if we lose this game, our season's probably is over. But if we win, we might be able to turn it around. But I just think North Carolina is better.
All right. So I threw out my Jim Larrañaga's losing his mind theory. And I'm hoping that I'm wrong and thinking that he knows what he's doing. This is it. This Miami team is either a total bust or it's going to make a season out of this. They were embarrassed last night. If they don't play well in this game, it's over. All right. So now I'm going with Miami. All right. So now we have Houston at Cincinnati.
I like this game. This kind of gives me like down. It's going to be just defensive minded, like athleticism on full display. The offense is going to come from putbacks and hard, tough finishes and transition steals. I just think Houston plays that way a little bit better than Cincinnati, so I'm going to take Houston.
Yeah. One thing about Houston is used to playing Cincinnati,
yes.
And they're both new to the conference. So when they go play Texas Tech or Texas or whatever, that's all a new experience for them. But Houston's used to dominating Cincinnati. So I think they're going to come into this game with confidence. And I think it'll be close, but I'm going with Houston.
For sure.
I wrote down the opposite of what I was saying. Going with Houston. All right. Now we have Gonzaga at Kentucky. I don't think it's do or die, but I will say if Gonzaga wins this game, they're probably in the tournament no matter what.
I will be wearing my Zags Got Dudes hoodie. I will be going nuts, pulling for them. But from the pure standpoint, I think Kentucky is just better right now. On the road, I'm taking Kentucky, but man, I'm going to be pulling so hard for my Zags.
Yeah, I got to go with Kentucky at home, though. Kentucky, as we talked about at the top of the show, is dealing with some injuries, but they're very deep, have plenty of guys to come off the bench and play. All right, so now we have Washington State at Oregon. These are 2 bubble teams in the Pac-12 that are Oregon, after a couple losses, is now fallen down and no longer in first place. This is kind of a really important game because the winner will kind of be that 4th place team in the Pac-12.
Right. I'm going to take Oregon, and I think they're just kind of behind the 8 ball because Biddle and Dante missed so much time that they're still not an excuse. Like, they're not necessarily. Well, Biddle kind of looks like he's still trying to get his legs underneath him. Dante's been pretty solid since he's come back, so I think they feel they understand the moment at home, kind of like, hey, we really need to get this one. Especially after a loss at home to UCLA, which that was the last game I actually watched that day. So I'm going to take Oregon, but
I'm going with Oregon at home
way.
as well, but it should be close. Washington State's been a surprise, and they're playing well. All right, now we have number 13 Baylor at number 4 Kansas. I wanted to say that when Kansas, I think the record they threw up on TV the other day, when Bill Self plays a ranked team that's ranked higher than him. So Houston came in ranked higher than Kansas. His record at home is like 21 or 22-1.
Yeah.
He's won like 98% of his games at home against teams ranked higher than Kansas. This is not the case here. Baylor is ranked 13th. Kansas is 4th.
I distinctly remember picking against Kansas when UConn came to town, and I kind of dismissed the Allen Fieldhouse home court advantage. I'm not making that mistake here. I really like this Baylor team, but man, KU when they're super top heavy, but their top guys they're dudes, man. They got some dudes, and that place is hell to play at. And Self might be the best coach in the sport. So I think you put all that together, and I'm going with Kansas.
Yeah, I think Kansas plays better defense. I think they're more physical. I'm going with Kansas at home. Just don't bet against Kansas at home. Just don't do it. All right, now we have Indiana State has pretty much almost locked up the top seed in the Missouri Valley. They don't really have to play any of the teams with winning records anymore. When they defeated Drake this past weekend, it was like their last super tough game in conference. So now Drake and Bradley are playing for second place, unless Indiana State falls on its face. So this is the second place game between Drake and Bradley.
I'm gonna honestly, I haven't seen these teams play at all this year. I'm not familiar with either of them, so I'll take the home team.
Yeah,
Give me the home team.
I too
Give me
am
Bradley at home.
Yeah, I'm going with Bradley at home. I've seen them both. I don't know them inside and out like I know the Power 6 teams, but they're both really good teams. Indiana State's just better. All right. So, but anyway, Indiana State's not involved in this game, so we're all three of us are going with Bradley. All right. So now we have Virginia at Florida State. Virginia's won, I think, 6, 7 in a row to take hold of sole possession of third place or maybe second place in the ACC. I think
they might be in second. I could be wrong, but they might be in second.
I think Virginia has played their way into the tournament, by the way.
Yes, I would agree. There's like always, so I don't know what it is. I feel like there's been a lot of ACC slander in recent years. And I feel like when I was a kid, that was like just clearly not the case. It was like the best conference in college basketball. And now people talk about it like so despairingly. With all that being said though, I'm gonna take Virginia.
All right. Florida State has been wildly inconsistent this year. Yeah. Part of the reason is they don't have shooters. They don't have scorers. But, man, can they play defense, with their length and their pressure and their depth. It's going to be a really interesting matchup. I'm going to go with Florida State at home. This Virginia team is not physical. This Virginia team doesn't really have an inside scoring option. So it's going to be interesting. But I think if Florida State can pressure them in the turnovers and guard on the perimeter, they'll win this. I'm going with Florida State at home. All right. Now we have Arizona at Colorado, and I would think this would be a toss-up if we knew Kobe Williams was playing. But we don't know the status of it is. So, yeah.
That's the reason I'm going to lean Arizona. I mean, Colorado started off this year as a top 25 team, has fell from that pretty quickly, but still is a really talented team. Like I wouldn't want to play this team, particularly at home. But again, I just think Arizona, if Williams can't go, we don't know as we're making the picks here. Arizona is just, again, a better team. So I'm going to go with the Wildcats.
I will say this for our betting friends. I think if Kobe Williams does play in this game, Colorado wins. Colorado's notorious for giving Arizona fits at their place. So yeah, Colorado could win that if they're healthy. All right, now we have Boise State at number 22, Utah State. Boy, Boise's got to go to Colorado State, and then they got to go to Utah State.
That's a tough Mountain West slate. I think Utah State's lost both times I picked them, but I'm gonna just say I haven't learned my lesson yet. I'm gonna go with the Aggies again. I'm pretty sure they've lost both
I
times.
gotta agree. I gotta go with the home team. Though the home thing doesn't seem to be holding up as much as we would expect in the Mountain West.
Agreed.
So we're back down to Sunday's games. We got two. We have Seton Hall, who has a great record, but the computers hate them, at Villanova.
Despite the computers, give me Seton Hall. No, I took Villanova earlier against Xavier, but again, this team has been so they have not been the Nova past that we're used to, or they're just kind of that like consistent buzzsaw. So if I'm going to give Nova one win against Xavier, I'm going to give them a loss here against Seton Hall.
Wow. By the way, Caleb didn't make these picks, but we haven't set his picks, so he's going to be excluded from these two. You're going. Oh, I put my pick. I put your pick in my slot, so I am going with Nova at home. I think Seton Hall's. I kind of agree with the computers here that Seton Hall's record isn't as good as they are, though they've had some great wins. But yeah, and by the way, they held DePaul. I think they beat DePaul the other day, something like 78-39.
Yeah, they crushed them.
39 points. Another one. How many games are we going to see this year where the team can't break 40? That's embarrassing.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah,
so
39, 72, 39.
All right. I said 78. All right. So now we have last game. Caleb didn't pick this one. We have Tulane at Memphis. Tulane nipped Memphis earlier on, but Memphis is home now.
I'm going to take Memphis. I know we've spoken about some of their issues, but I think this is a type of game where they are more talented. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. They're at home, and hopefully there's enough of a kind of a fire under their ass of like, hey, we lost to these guys. Like, we cannot lose to these guys at home. So I'll take the Tigers.
Yeah, I'm going to go in Memphis at home. You know, this is another do or die game. This team, no matter what any bracketologist tells you, they are very much on the bubble. And I think if things started today, they're out. So they need this.
Agreed.
All right. So I'm going to quickly go over Caleb's picks. Yeah, I should have announced them earlier, and I'll go as quick as possible. In Ole Miss to South Carolina, Caleb went with South Carolina. He went with Iowa State at Texas. He went with BYU at Oklahoma. He went with Baylor at home versus Texas Tech. We all went with Colorado State against Boise State. He went with Michigan State to win at Minnesota. He went with Auburn at home against Bama. He went with Nova at home, on the road at Xavier. He went with Northwestern at home against Nebraska. He went with UNC Greensboro at home against Samford. He went with Zona on the road at Utah. He went with UCSB hosting Irvine. He went with VCU to beat his Dayton Flyers. He grew up in Dayton. Ooh, the traitor. He's going with VCU. Drew and I went with Dayton. He went with San Diego State to win at Nevada. He went with Illinois to win at Michigan State. He went with Iowa State to win at home against TCU. He went with Yale versus Cornell. He went with Auburn versus Florida. He went with Drexel to win on the road at Charleston. It's a little surprise there. Went with UNC to win at Miami. He went with Houston. We have 3-game sweep there to win at Cincinnati. We all picked Kentucky to beat Gonzaga. We all picked Oregon to win at home against Washington State. We all picked Kansas to beat Baylor. We all picked Bradley to win in over Drake. He went with Virginia at Florida State. He went with Zona. All three of us went with Zona at Colorado. We all went with Utah State to beat Boise at home, and he skipped the last 2 games probably because the list was too freaking long. We had 30 games, and I tried to trim it down. I took off like 10. It was just really tough. It's getting tough because all these teams are bunched in the middle, and they're all really good games.
There's so few clear cut. I mean, even like the teams that are undefeated in their conference, like St. Mary's only has, I mean, I know there's only so many games left, but like only has a 2-game lead. Like they could drop a game and now all of a sudden it's back to a one-horse race. Having like there's no like, there's very few conferences, particularly along the Power Six and then like the higher mid majors, where nobody's really very few teams have separated outside of again like a UConn and a Purdue. Everyone else is right there.
Right. I agree. All right. So as always, I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to thank our, well, we didn't have a special guest. I always do that. I just read right from the script.
I'm the special guest, ladies and gentlemen.
Drew's our special guest. If you ever miss this episode, you can get caught up at Hoops Prospects. Also, if you'd like to send us a question for the mailbag, you can email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. And we also take questions, comments, threats on social media, on Twitter @Hoops Prospects, where Alabama fans love me, on Instagram @TheHoopsProspects, and on Facebook @Hoops Pros. We will be back actually this week. We're going to do a little NBA just before the trade deadline and a little talk about trades. We got an article on the site today about the NBA trades that Cam Reel wrote, one of our NBA guys. So check that out. And so we'll be back later this week to talk NBA, and we'll be back next week to talk more about college. Any final thoughts, Drew?
We're getting it. We're getting to that point where every game starts to matter. And like I said, regardless of your fandom, my fandom not being the peak of power that they've normally been, you still have to love college basketball because it is the best sport out there, because anybody on any given day can beat anybody on any given day.
By the way, do you realize there's 2 teams out there, Detroit Mercy, and I forget who the other one is. Detroit Mercy, last time looked, 0-24. And there's another team out there that's 0-22.
Okay, well, those teams can't beat anybody on any given day. But anybody else can beat anybody on any given day.
And I'm surprised DePaul has won a game this.
Yeah, that's true. They are. I caught a DePaul. How did I watch DePaul? It probably wasn't fair. I think I watched them play like UConn. It's either like UConn or Creighton. So it was definitely like they were severe underdog. I think it was Creighton. And I was like, wow, this is my first and only taste of how bad this team is this year.
I must admit, I have not seen DePaul play. They might be the only Power 6 team that I haven't seen play this year. I just know that they're going to get trounced.
It's not worth the time.
Yes,
it's not worth
exactly.
Especially in the Big East, where you got Marquette, Creighton. I mean, even a middling Villanova team is just so much better than them.
Well, right now, I think Villanova's in the tournament, because of those early wins. And they've been able to play about 500 in conference, and that should be good enough.
For sure.
Yeah.
And if they pick up one big win, they'll probably lock it in. Like if they pull off an upset.
Yeah, you know what? I think if they're 500 in the Big East, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
But I don't expect them to go much more because they're so wildly inconsistent. But anyway. All right. You want to hear my final thought, Drew?
Let's hear it.
Roll Tide.
Happy, folks.
See you later, folks.